My sister accidentally added me to the real family group chat where they had been roasting me for 8 years. 800 messages calling me the charity case betting on when I would fail and celebrating my divorce. I did not leave the group. I did not cry. I simply screenshot every single thing. Then I sent one message that changed the trajectory of our entire bloodline. Thanks for the receipts. What I did next at Grandma Hattie's birthday party, nobody saw coming. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. My name is Simone, and at 35 years old, I have mastered the art of being invisible. To my family back in Atlanta, I am the quiet, divorced failure living in a cramped Chicago apartment scraping by on data entry wages. To the rest of the world, I am a senior forensic accountant for one of the top firms in the city, currently finalizing a report on a $20 million embezzlement scheme. I spend my days tracking hidden assets and exposing corporate fraud, so when people lie to me, I usually know it before they even finish their sentence. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was sitting in my corner office overlooking the Chicago skyline. The gray clouds reflected the steel of the skyscrapers, mirroring my mood. I was exhausted. I had spent the last 48 hours auditing a pharmaceutical CEO who thought he could hide company funds in offshore shell accounts. My eyes were burning from staring at spreadsheets, but the thrill of the catch kept me going. I had him. I had found the missing link in a Cayman Island wire transfer. I took a sip of my black coffee, preparing to draft the email that would end his career, when my personal phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. I frowned. Nobody called me during work hours. My mother Patricia only called when she wanted to criticize my life choices, and my sister Bianca only called when she needed money. I glanced at the screen. A notification from WhatsApp popped up. "You were added to the winner's circle." I froze. The winner's circle. I knew that name. I had heard my mother and Bianca whisper it at family gatherings, giggling behind their hands like high school mean girls. It was the exclusive family group chat. The one for the successful members of the Walker family. The one I had been deliberately excluded from for nearly a decade. My finger hovered over the screen. It had to be a mistake. Bianca was probably trying to forward a photo of her latest wig or a fake designer purse to her husband Kyle, and her fingers slipped. But she had not realized it yet. There was no message saying Simone was added by mistake or "oops, remove her." The chat remained silent. I knew I should just leave the group. I should maintain my peace and ignore their petty hierarchy. But the forensic accountant in me took over. This was data. This was evidence. And I never walk away from a paper trail. I opened the chat. My heart hammered against my ribs, not out of fear, but out of a morbid curiosity. I scrolled up. The history loaded. 1 month, 6 months, 2 years. It was a digital archive of hatred. I started reading from the most recent messages. Yesterday at 8:43 p.m., my mother Patricia wrote, "I cannot believe Simone is coming to Mama Hattie's birthday. I hope she does not wear that tragic polyester suit from last Christmas. It smelled like poverty." I looked down at my silk blouse, which cost more than my mother's car note. I kept scrolling. 2 days ago, my brother-in-law Kyle sent a message. He is a white real estate agent who has not sold a house in 6 months, yet he walks around our family gatherings like he owns the place. He wrote, "Do we really have to invite her? She is just going to mope around looking for a handout. I do not want her depressing energy ruining my networking opportunities." Bianca replied with a laughing emoji, "Relax, babe. We need someone to help the caterers set up. Since she cannot afford a gift, her manual labor is her contribution. We will just tell her it is family bonding." I felt a cold tightness in my chest. They did not want me there. They wanted a servant. I scrolled back further. 3 months ago. The day of my divorce was finalized. I remembered that day clearly. I was heartbroken, sitting alone in my apartment, wondering where I went wrong. I had called my mother for comfort. She had told me she was busy at a spa appointment and hung up after 2 minutes. Here in the chat, the reality was different. Bianca had posted a picture of a bottle of champagne. Finally. The loser is officially single. Who had March 15th in the betting pool? Kyle replied. Damn, I had April. I lost $50. My mother wrote. At least now we do not have to pretend to like him. I always knew she could not keep a man. She does not have the Walker charm. She takes after her father's side too much. Too sensitive. Too weak. I griped my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. They had bet on the end of my marriage. They had celebrated my pain while I was drowning in it. I went back to Christmas. I had saved up for months to buy my mother a Telfar bag. It was the medium shopper in oxblood leather, a brand that symbolizes Black excellence and luxury within our community. I thought she would appreciate the cultural significance. In the chat, my mother posted a photo of the bag sitting on the floor next to the trash can. Look at this cheap thing. She probably got it at a discount store. Who wears this? I wanted a Louis Vuitton. This looks like a shopping bag. I am going to give it to the housekeeper, Bianca replied. OMG, Mom, that is hilarious. She really thinks she did something. That is what happens when you are the charity case of the family. You have no taste because you have no budget. The charity case. That was the nickname. It appeared over and over again. Search results showed 87 matches for the phrase charity case. Did the charity case ask for money yet? Don't let the charity case sit next to the investors. Make sure the charity case parks her rusty Honda on the street so the neighbors don't see it. I sat in my ergonomic office chair surrounded by awards for excellence in financial investigation, and I felt like a small child again. I felt like the little girl who was always too quiet, too dark, too nerdy for her glamorous mother and sister. I felt the old shame rising up the heat in my cheeks, the sting of tears in my eyes. But then I looked at the timestamp on the screen. It was 2:15 p.m. I had a meeting with the partners in 20 minutes to present my findings on the embezzlement case. I was not that little girl anymore. I was a grown woman who took down corrupt CEOs for breakfast. I took a deep breath and pushed the tears back. I turned off my emotions and turned on my professional brain. I treated the group chat like a subpoenaed bank statement. I stopped looking for insults and started looking for leverage. I scrolled faster now, scanning for financial keywords. Debt, loan, credit, IRS. And there it was. Buried between the insults were the cracks in their perfect facade. 6 months ago, Bianca messaged Kyle. The bank called again about the second mortgage. You said the commission check was coming. If we miss another payment on the house, they are going to start foreclosure proceedings before Grandma's party. Kyle replied. Chill, babe. I am moving money around. Just put the party deposit on the Amex. We will pay it off when your mom gives us the trust fund access. My eyes narrowed. Trust fund access. Grandma Hattie's trust fund. I kept digging. I found a photo of a letter from the IRS addressed to Kyle. He had captioned it, "Stupid government trying to rob me." Does anyone know a good accountant who can make this disappear? Bianca replied. Don't ask Simone. She is too by the book. She would probably turn us in. Just ignore it. Once Grandma signs the power of attorney next month, we can use her assets to clear the tax lien. My blood ran cold. This was not just mean girl gossip anymore. This was conspiracy to commit fraud. They were planning to use Grandma Hattie's dementia, or what they thought was dementia, to drain her accounts and cover their own failed lifestyle. They called me the charity case, but they were the ones drowning in debt waiting for an inheritance to save them. I looked at the clock. 2:25 p.m. I had 5 minutes left before my meeting. I could have just left the group. I could have called my mother and screamed. I could have exposed them right then and there, but that would be too easy. That would be emotional. And Simone, the forensic accountant, does not get emotional. She gets receipts. I opened the export function on WhatsApp. I selected export chat with media. The file was huge, Hundreds of megabytes of photos, voice notes, and text threads. I emailed the entire zip file to my work email, my personal cloud storage, and my hard drive. I created a folder named The Winner's Circle Evidence. Then I opened my banking app. I checked my balance. It was healthy. Very healthy. I looked at the transaction from yesterday where I wired $25,000 to the skilled nursing facility that cares for Grandma Hattie's physical therapy needs. A bill I had been paying secretly for 5 years because Bianca and my mother claimed they could not afford the best care. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. I went back to the group chat. It had been silent for 2 hours since Bianca added me. They still did not know. They were probably busy planning their outfits for the party, outfits bought on credit cards that were maxed out. I typed a message. I kept it short. I wanted them to know that I saw everything. Thank you for the warm welcome to the winner's circle. I have just finished reading the last 2 years of messages. Bianca, that red dress you are planning to buy for the party is stunning. It matches the shade of red on your American Express statement. And Mom, do not worry about the Telfar bag. I will take it back. It is worth more than the equity in Kyle's unsold listings combined. I hit send. I watched the 2 blue checks appear instantly. Read by Bianca, read by Patricia, read by Kyle. Then I saw the typing bubbles appear. 3 chaotic, bouncing bubbles as they all tried to type at once, panic radiating through the screen. I did not wait for their response. I did not want to hear their excuses, their gaslighting, or their fake apologies. I tapped the group info. I scrolled down to the bottom. I hit exit group, then I went to my contacts and blocked them all. Bianca, block. Patricia, block. Kyle, block. I set my phone down on the desk just as my assistant knocked on the door. Ms. Walker, the partners are ready for you in the boardroom. I stood up, smoothing down my silk skirt. I picked up my laptop and my files. I felt lighter than I had in years. The secret was out. The war had begun. And for the first time in my life, I was not the victim. I was the one holding the smoking gun. They wanted me to come to Atlanta for Grandma's 80th birthday. They wanted the charity case to show up and serve them. Oh, I would show up all right. But I would not be serving drinks. I would be serving justice. I walked into the boardroom, head held high, ready to present my $20 million fraud case. But in the back of my mind, I was already planning a much more personal investigation, one that would end with a slideshow at a birthday party that no one would ever forget. Grandma Hattie always said the truth will set you free, but she forgot to mention that first it will make you really, really angry. 2 days of silence is a luxury I have not experienced in 8 years. After blocking my mother, my sister, and her husband, my phone stopped being a source of anxiety and returned to being a tool for business. I spent those 48 hours doing what I do best, which is dissecting financial lies. I closed the $20 million embezzlement case, handing over a digital mountain of evidence to the district attorney. My boss, a man of few words, simply nodded and told me my bonus this quarter would be substantial. He has no idea that to me the money is just a scoreboard. It is proof that I exist, that I matter, and that I am competent, things my family has spent a lifetime trying to disprove. I was sitting in my office on Thursday afternoon organizing my files and feeling a strange sense of calm. The sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I allowed myself a moment to breathe, to actually enjoy the silence. But the universe, or rather my mother Patricia, hates a vacuum. My desk phone rang. Not my cell phone, which was still a fortress of blocked numbers, but my direct office line. A number only a handful of people have. I frowned, checking the caller ID. It was listed as unknown caller. Instinctively, I knew. My stomach did a slow, heavy turn, the kind you feel when an elevator drops too fast. I picked up the receiver, my professional voice automatic and crisp. Simone Walker speaking. There was no greeting, no hello, just a sharp intake of breath and a voice that sounded like tearing silk. You are a very difficult person to reach, Simone. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have to Google my own daughter's office number because she is throwing a tantrum and blocking her family? My mother's voice has a specific frequency. It is high-polished and laced with a permanent tone of disappointment. It instantly transported me back to being 10 years old, standing in the kitchen while she critiqued my posture. "Hello, Mother," I said, keeping my eyes fixed on the Chicago skyline. "I am at work. Is there an emergency?" "The only emergency is your selfishness," she snapped. "We have been trying to reach you for 2 days. Bianca has been crying nonstop. She is in a fragile state, Simone. The stress of planning your grandmother's 80th birthday party is overwhelming her, and then you pull this stunt, leaving the family group chat, sending that nasty message. It was cruel. I almost laughed. The absurdity of it clawed at my throat. They had spent 2 years mocking me, betting on my divorce, calling me a charity case, and I was the cruel one for reading it. "I did not realize that reading your own words back to you would be considered cruel," I said calmly. "I thought you would appreciate the accuracy." "Oh, stop being so dramatic," she scoffed. "It is just a chat room. People blow off steam. We were joking. You have always been too sensitive, just like your father. You take everything so personally. Bianca loves you. We all love you. We just worry about you." "Worry about me," I repeated. "Is that why Kyle bet $50 on my divorce? Because he was worried Kyle has a strange sense of humor?" She dismissed it instantly. "He is a man. They make bad jokes. But that is not why I'm calling. I am not going to argue with you while there is work to be done. We need you to come home." I leaned back in my chair, twirling a pen between my fingers. "I am not coming, Mother. I think it is best if I stay in Chicago. I do not want to ruin Bianca's mood with my cheap clothes and my depressing energy." There was a pause on the other end, a calculated silence. Then her voice dropped, becoming softer, more dangerous. "This is not about you, Simone. This is about Grandma Hattie. She is turning 80. Do you know what the doctors said? Her heart is weak. This could be her last big celebration." "Are you really going to be the reason she is heartbroken on her birthday? Are you going to be the one empty chair at the table because you cannot take a joke, the guilt trip, the weapon of choice for Patricia Walker?" She knew Grandma Hattie was my weak spot. She knew I would walk through fire for that woman. "Fine," I said, my voice tight. "I will come for the party. I will fly in Saturday morning and leave Sunday." "No, that will not work," she said quickly. "We need you there tomorrow." "Friday morning. Tomorrow I have a job. Mother, I cannot just leave. Oh, please." She let out a short, derisive laugh. "A job, Simone, you do data entry. I am sure if you ask your supervisor nicely, they will let you take a shift off. Tell them it is a family emergency. We need you here early because Bianca had to let the event coordinator go." Why I asked, though, I already suspected the answer. Creative differences, she lied smoothly. The woman did not understand Bianca's vision. "So we need you to step in. You are good at small tasks, organizing tables, folding napkins, checking guests in. You know logistics. Since you cannot afford to buy Grandma a proper gift, consider this your contribution. It is the least you can do after all the support we have given you over the years." I closed my eyes. They wanted free labor. They wanted me to come home, endure their insults, and work as a servant at a party where I should be a guest of honor. I was about to say no. I was about to tell her to go to hell and hang up. But just as I opened my mouth, a notification pinged on my laptop screen. It was an email. The subject line read, "Confidential, regarding Harriet Walker estate." The sender was Arthur Jenkins, Grandma Hattie's attorney, a man who had been retired for 5 years, but apparently was still working for one client. I clicked it open while my mother continued to ramble in my ear about flower arrangements. "Dear Simone," the email read, "your grandmother asked me to reach out. She is aware of the situation with the trust. She knows about the power of attorney documents Bianca is drafting. She needs you here. She is playing a game, Simone, but she cannot win it alone. She asks that you come, but do not let them know that you and I are in contact. Play the part. See you in Atlanta. Arthur. My heart hammered against my ribs. Grandma knew. She wasn't senile. She wasn't frail. She was plotting. Are you still there? My mother demanded. I am here. I said, my voice steady again. Okay. I will do it. I will come tomorrow to help set up. Good. She let out a sigh of relief, though it sounded more like satisfaction. Now about your travel, do not worry about the cost. I know money is tight for you right now. I spoke to Kyle and he is going to book your flight. You do not have to do that, I said. Nonsense, she interrupted. We take care of family. He has some points or miles or something. He can get you an economy seat on the early bird flight. It is the one with the layover in Charlotte, so it will take about 6 hours, but it is free. Just bring a sandwich with you so you do not have to buy airport food. You know how expensive that is. The condescension was so thick I could almost taste it. Kyle, the man who owed the IRS 6 figures, was going to graciously use his non-existent miles to put me on a 6-hour flight, with a layover, likely in a middle seat by the bathroom, just to remind me of my place. That is very generous of him, I said, my tone completely flat. Send me the details. And Simone, she added one last sting before hanging up. Try to dress a bit better this time. We have invited important people, investors for Bianca's business. Don't look like yourself. She hung up. I sat there listening to the dial tone for a full 10 seconds. Then I gently placed the receiver back in the cradle. Don't look like myself. I turned to my computer. I opened the email from Arthur Jenkins and replied with 2 words, I'm in. Then I opened a new tab. Delta Airlines. I did not wait for Kyle's email confirmation of the economy seat. I would let him book it. Let him feel benevolent. Let him think he was saving the poor charity case from taking a Greyhound bus. I typed in my destination, Chicago O'Hare to Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson. Direct. I scrolled past Basic Economy. I scrolled past Main Cabin. I scrolled past Comfort Plus. I selected Delta One. First class. The seat that turns into a bed. The ticket cost $2,400. I pulled out my own credit card, the heavy metal black card that I earned through 80-hour work weeks and forensic precision. I entered the numbers without hesitation. Next, I opened the car rental tab. My mother expected me to ask for a ride from the airport, or maybe take the train to save money. Or perhaps she thought I would arrive in a rusted sedan. I filtered the search results. Luxury. Exotics. There it was. A Porsche Panamera. Sleek, black, aggressive. $400 a day. I clicked reserve. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the city one last time. They wanted me to play a role. They wanted the beaten-down, divorced, destitute sister who needed their charity and scrambled for their crumbs. They wanted a servant to check coats and fold napkins while they pitched their failing business ideas to investors. I would play the role. I would let them believe exactly what they wanted to believe. I would fly in under the radar, let Kyle think his cheap ticket saved the day, and let my mother think she had bullied me into submission. But when I stepped off that plane, I wouldn't be Simone the charity case. I would be Simone the auditor. And I was coming to conduct the most thorough audit of their lives. I packed my laptop bag, making sure to include my encrypted hard drive containing the 8 gigabytes of group chat exports. I checked my reflection in the dark monitor of my computer. My face was calm, impassive. The face of someone who knows where the bodies are buried and exactly how much the shovel cost. I stood up, smoothed my silk skirt, and walked out of my office. Game on, Grandma. Game on. The flight from Chicago to Atlanta is only 2 hours, but the distance between who I am and who my family thinks I am feels like crossing an ocean. I sat in seat 1A, sipping a glass of pre-flight champagne, while my mother probably imagined me squeezed into the middle seat of row 34, eating a homemade sandwich wrapped in tinfoil. The flight attendant asked if I needed a refill, and I smiled, declining politely. I needed to keep a clear head. I was not flying home for a reunion. I was flying into a crime scene investigation where the crime was the systematic theft of my dignity, and the suspects were waiting on the front porch with open arms and hidden daggers. When the plane landed at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, the humidity hit me the moment I stepped onto the jet bridge. It was that thick Georgia heat that sticks to your skin and makes everything move a little slower. I walked past the baggage claim, where my brother-in-law Kyle had likely assumed I would be waiting for a shuttle bus. I walked straight to the premium rental car counter. The agent looked at my reservation, and then up at me with a nod of respect. "Mrs. Walker, we have the Porsche Panamera ready for you in Bay 4. Black on black, just as you requested." I took the keys. The weight of the fob in my hand felt grounding. This car was not just a mode of transportation. It was armor. It was a $400 a day shield against the pity I knew was waiting for me. I slid into the driver's seat and the smell of expensive leather filled my lungs. I connected my phone, let the smooth jazz playlist sync up, and pulled out of the garage. The drive to Buckhead is a journey through the layers of black wealth in Atlanta. You pass the new money, the old money, and the money that pretends to be old. My grandmother's estate sits in the heart of the district, a sprawling property with manicured lawns and towering oak trees that have stood witness to generations of family secrets. As I turned onto the long, winding driveway, my heart rate spiked. It is a Pavlovian response. My body remembers the anxiety of this place, even when my mind tells me I am safe. I saw the house looming ahead. It is a beautiful structure, white columns and red brick, but to me, it always looked like a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. My sunglasses were oversized designer frames that covered half my face. My lipstick was a shade of deep crimson called Vendetta. I was ready. I pulled the Porsche up to the front entrance, the tires crunching satisfyingly on the gravel. I could see movement behind the sheer curtains of the living room window. They were watching. They were always watching. Before I could even put the car in park, the front door swung open. It was not my mother. It was not Bianca. It was Kyle. He stepped out onto the porch wearing a polo shirt that was tucked in a little too tight and loafers with no socks. He shielded his eyes from the sun, looking at the car with a mixture of confusion and greed. He did not look at me. He looked at the hood of the Porsche. He looked at the rims. He looked at the logo. Only then did he look at the driver. I rolled down the window. The air conditioning rushed out to meet the humid afternoon air. Kyle stood there, his hands on his hips, a smirk already forming on his lips. He looked me up and down, analyzing my appearance, searching for the flaw, searching for the crack in the facade. "Well, look who it is," he said, his voice dripping with that specific brand of condescension he reserved just for me. "I see you made it. And in style, too." I turned off the engine and stepped out. I smoothed down my dress. "Hello, Kyle," I said. He walked around the car, running a hand along the roof. He whistled low and long. "Wow, Simone. This is a serious machine. Did your new boyfriend let you take it for a spin for the weekend?" That was nice of him. Though I hope he has good insurance. These German cars are not cheap to fix if you scratch them. I felt a flash of heat behind my sunglasses. Of course. In Kyle's world, there was no version of reality where Simone, the charity case, could afford to rent a luxury vehicle on her own. It had to be a loan. It had to be a man. It had to be a favor. I leaned against the door, keeping my expression bored. "Something like that," I said. "A friend let me borrow it. He said I needed to make an entrance." Kyle laughed, a short barking sound that grated on my nerves. "Right, a friend. Well, you definitely made an entrance. But you know you cannot park this here, right?" He gestured vaguely toward the side of the house where the gravel gave way to dirt and overgrown bushes. "We have the valet company coming in the morning to set up for the VIPs. We need this driveway clear for the investors and the partners. You can park around the back near the kitchen entrance. It is where the catering staff parks. Less risk of you dinging a Bentley when the real guests arrive." The real guests. The phrase hung in the air, heavy and toxic. It transported me back instantly. It was not the first time Kyle had tried to put me in my place. My mind flashed back 10 years. I was 25, barely out of grad school, and broke. Kyle had just started dating Bianca. He was the golden boy, then the real estate prodigy who was going to take the Walker family to the next level. We were at a restaurant, a steakhouse in downtown Atlanta that I could not afford. I had ordered the chicken because it was the cheapest thing on the menu. Kyle had looked at my order and then looked at me across the table. "Simone," he had said loudly enough for the waiter to hear. "You never order chicken at a steakhouse. It shows a lack of sophistication. It tells the kitchen you do not know how to eat. Order the filet. I will cover it. Consider it a lesson in how to live." I remembered the shame burning my cheeks. I remembered shrinking into my seat, mumbling a thank you while Bianca squeezed his arm and giggled, calling him generous. I remembered him lecturing me later that night about tipping. "You tip 20% to show status, Simone. Even if the service is bad," he had said, swirling his brandy. "Wealth is a language. And you are mumbling. You need to learn to speak up if you want to fit in with this family." 10 years later, and he was still trying to teach me the language. He was still trying to correct my grammar. But he did not know that I had gone on to write the dictionary. I looked at him standing there in his tight polo shirt, sweating slightly in the heat. I looked at the fear behind his eyes that he tried to mask with arrogance. I knew his credit score. I knew his tax liability. I knew that the lease on his own BMW was 2 months behind. He thought he was the gatekeeper of the manor, telling the servant where to park. I reached into my purse and pulled out the key fob. The Porsche crest caught the sunlight. Kyle was still talking, pointing toward the muddy patch of grass behind the kitchen. "Yeah, just reverse it carefully. The mud might be deep back there, but this thing has all-wheel drive, right? Just do not get the tires too dirty. We want everything looking perfect for tomorrow." I did not move toward the driver's seat. Instead, I took 2 steps toward him. Kyle paused, his finger still pointing toward the back of the house. "What are you doing?" he asked. I held up the keys. Then with a flick of my wrist, I tossed them through the air. Kyle's reflexes kicked in automatically. He fumbled for a second, his hands clutching at the air before he caught the fob against his chest. He looked down at the keys in his hand and then up at me, his face twisting in confusion. "What is this?" he asked. I adjusted my sunglasses, pushing them up the bridge of my nose. I pulled my carry-on bag from the back seat and slung it over my shoulder. I walked past him, heading straight for the front door. "I am tired from the flight, Kyle," I said, my voice cool and even. "And I am wearing heels. I am not walking through the mud." I stopped at the top step and looked down at him. He looked small from this angle. "Park it for me, would you? And Kyle, be careful." I paused, letting the silence stretch out until he was forced to look me in the eye. "The insurance on that car costs more than your salary last year. Do not scratch it." I did not wait for his reaction. I did not wait to see the color drain from his face or the anger flare in his eyes. I turned around and pushed open the heavy oak doors of my grandmother's house, leaving him standing in the driveway holding the keys to a life he could only pretend to afford. I stepped into the cool, air-conditioned foyer. The smell of lemon polish and old wood greeted me. I was home. The enemy was at the gate, but I had just walked right through the front door. 1 down, 3 to go. The foyer of my grandmother's house was cool and silent, a stark contrast to the humid heat outside, where I had left Kyle standing in the driveway holding the keys to a car he could not afford to insure. But as I moved deeper into the house toward the kitchen, the silence was broken by a voice I knew better than my own. It was a voice that pitched itself an octave higher than natural, a voice that dripped with a manufactured sweetness that made my teeth ache. It was the voice of my sister Bianca performing for an audience of invisible strangers. I walked through the formal dining room where the long mahogany table was already set with grandmother's finest china. I ran a finger along the edge of a chair. Dust. They had set the table, but they had not cleaned the room. Typical. Appearance over substance. I pushed open the swinging door to the kitchen, and the scene before me was a masterclass in modern deception. The kitchen was massive. A chef's dream with white marble countertops, a 6-burner wolf range, and a sub-zero fridge that cost more than my first car. But right now it looked less like a kitchen and more like a television studio. A massive ring light was set up on a tripod, its harsh white halo illuminating the center island. Behind it stood Bianca. She was wearing a white silk robe that was tied loosely at the waist, revealing just enough skin to keep the engagement algorithm happy. Her makeup was flawless, a full contour that sculpted her face into something sharper than reality. She was holding a glass of champagne in one hand and talking to her phone, which was propped up in the center of the ring light. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I am so excited to take you behind the scenes. We are here at the family estate in Buckhead, just doing the final prep for my grandmother's 80th birthday gala. It is going to be insane, you guys. We have spared no expense. Look at these flowers. She gestured grandly toward a vase of hydrangeas that I recognized from the local supermarket. They still had the plastic wrap around the stems hidden inside the vase. We have flown in a private chef from Paris, she lied effortlessly, taking a sip of the champagne. And the guest list is exclusive. We are talking old money Atlanta. It is so stressful being the one in charge of the family legacy, but someone has to do it. You know what they say, heavy is the head that wears the crown. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. I watched her spin this web of fantasy. A private chef from Paris. I knew for a fact they had hired a local catering company that specialized in budget weddings because I had seen the invoice in the trash can outside. Bianca kept talking, answering comments from her live stream. Oh, thank you, user Hot Girl Summer. Yes, the robe is vintage silk. No, I cannot link it. It is one of a kind, just like everything we do here. She laughed, a tinkling fake sound that echoed in the high ceilings. I stepped fully into the room. My heels clicked against the travertine floor, a sharp staccato rhythm that cut through her monologue. Bianca's eyes flicked up. She saw me. For a split second, her smile faltered, a crack in the porcelain mask. But she recovered instantly, playing it off for the camera. Oh, look who just arrived. It is my little sister Simone. She finally made it in from Chicago. She is here to help the staff with the cleanup. Say hi, Simone. She waved the phone in my direction, trying to use me as a prop in her reality show. I did not smile. I did not wave. I just stared at her, with the dead-level gaze of a woman who spends her days interrogating fraudsters. Bianca laughed nervously. Oh, she is camera shy. You know how some people are just not built for the spotlight. Anyway, guys, I have to go manage the staff. I will be back later with the unboxing of the party favors. Stay tuned. Kisses. She tapped the screen, ending the broadcast. The moment the screen went black, the transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The smile vanished. Her shoulders slumped. The light in her eyes went out, replaced by a dull, frantic irritation. She set the champagne glass down on the counter with a heavy thud. It was empty, I realized. She had been pretending to drink. You are late, she snapped, her voice dropping to its natural grating register. Mom said you would be here by noon. It is 2 o'clock. I had to pick up my rental car, I said, walking toward the island. And I see you started the party without me, or at least the fictional version of it. Don't start with me, Simone, she hissed, pulling the ring light down. I am building a brand. Something you would not understand in your little cubicle life. Perception is reality. If people think we are successful, then we are successful. That is how the world works. That is how fraud works, Bianca. I corrected her mentally, but I kept my mouth shut. I walked around the island, and that is when I saw it. In her haste to set up her filming station, Bianca had shoved a pile of mail to the side of the counter. It was a messy stack of envelopes hidden behind a fruit bowl out of the camera's view. To anyone else, it was just junk mail. But to me, it was a crime scene. My eyes scanned the pile automatically. My brain is wired to spot irregularities, to notice the things people try to hide. The first thing I saw was the red font. It is a specific shade of urgent red used by collections departments. The envelope was torn open, revealing the header. American Express Platinum. I did not need to pick it up to read the numbers. The bold text jumped out at me. Past due amount $45,342.18. My eyes moved to the next document. It was a letter from a mortgage servicer. Notice of default. This one was addressed to Bianca and Kyle's personal residence in Sandy Springs. Foreclosure proceedings to begin within 30 days. I felt a surge of adrenaline. It was the same feeling I got when I found the missing wire transfer in the pharmaceutical case. The smoking gun. They were not just broke. They were drowning. They were hemorrhaging money. The expensive clothes, the leasing of luxury cars, the fake lifestyle, it was all a house of cards built on credit debt that they could no longer service. And that is why they needed Grandma. That is why they needed the power of attorney. They needed to liquidate her assets to plug the holes in their own sinking ship before the water reached their necks. "What are you staring at?" Bianca demanded, stepping in front of me, blocking my view of the mail. She grabbed the stack of papers and shoved them into a drawer, her movements jerky and panicked. Nothing, I said calmly, shifting my gaze to her face, just admiring the organization. Bianca narrowed her eyes, searching my face for a sign that I had seen the numbers, but I gave her nothing. I kept my face blank, a perfect mask of indifference. She let out a huff of breath and walked over to a pile of grocery bags on the floor. She kicked one toward me. "Well, since you are finally here, make yourself useful. I fired the prep team this morning. They were stealing." I caught one of them eyeing the silverware. She reached into a drawer and pulled out an apron. She threw it at me. It sailed through the air and hit me in the chest, sliding down to the floor. "Put that on," she ordered. "We need 20 fruit platters for the cocktail hour tomorrow. The fruit is in the bags. Wash it, cut it, and arrange it. And make it look expensive, Simone. Do not give me those chunky cafeteria slices. I want elegant wedges." I looked down at the apron on the floor. It was a cheap polyester thing stained with something that looked like chocolate. "You want me to cater your party?" I asked, my voice low. "It is Grandma's party," she corrected me, putting her hands on her hips. "And yes, I do, because I cannot trust strangers in this house. People are greedy, Simone. They see what we have and they want to take it. At least with you, I know you won't steal anything." She laughed, a cruel, short sound. "Because honestly, what would you do with it? You would probably sell the silver to buy more of those tragic, sensible shoes. You have nothing to lose, so you are safe. Now get to work. Kyle and I have to go meet with the investors for dinner, so have this done before we get back." She turned her back to me, picking up her phone to check her engagement numbers. She dismissed me completely. To her, I was just a fixture in the kitchen, an appliance that could hold a knife. I bent down and picked up the apron. I folded it neatly and placed it on the counter. I did not put it on. I walked over to the knife block. I pulled out a chef's knife. The steel blade glinted under the harsh kitchen lights. It was sharp, well maintained. I opened the bag of apples. I took one out, placing it on the marble cutting board. Bianca was humming to herself, typing away on her screen. I sliced the apple. The sound was loud in the quiet kitchen. A crisp, clean crunch. Slice, slice, slice. I worked with rhythm. I worked with precision. "You know, Bianca," I said, my voice conversational, casual. "I was reading an article the other day about credit utilization." Bianca did not look up. "Boring," she muttered. "It was saying that once your debt-to-income ratio hits a certain percentage, it triggers an automatic review by the creditors." I continued slicing another apple. "Especially with premium cards like American Express. They do not just send letters, they start calling family members." Bianca's typing stopped. Her back went rigid. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice tight. I picked up a slice of apple, examining it for imperfections. "I am talking about risk assessment," I said. "Did you know that if you are over $40,000 past due, they categorize you as a flight risk? They start looking for secondary assets, like, say, the home of an elderly relative." Bianca spun around. Her face was pale beneath the contouring. "You looked through my mail," she accused, taking a step toward me. "I did not have to look through it, Bianca," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "It was right there. $45,342. That is a very specific number, and that is just one card. I set the knife down. You are not firing staff because they are stealing. You are firing them because you cannot pay them. You are making me cut fruit because I am the only free labor you can find. Bianca's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The arrogance was gone, replaced by sheer terror. You do not know what you are talking about, she stammered. It is a business expense. We are leveraged. It is how wealth works. I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed since I arrived. No, Bianca. Wealth is having money. Leverage is using money. What you have is a hole. A very deep hole. I walked around the island, closing the distance between us. And here is the thing about American Express, I whispered, leaning in close. They are aggressive. If they cannot reach you, they call the next of kin listed on your emergency contact. That would be Mom, right? Bianca's eyes went wide. They would not, she whispered. My phone rang this morning. I lied smoothly. Unknown number. I didn't answer. But Mom picks up every call. Doesn't she? Bianca backed away from me, her hand trembling. She reached for her glass of champagne on the counter, probably to take a drink to calm her nerves. But her hand was shaking too badly. Her fingers brushed the stem of the crystal flute. It tipped. Time seemed to slow down. We both watched the glass fall. It hit the marble floor with a shattering crash. Crystal shards exploded outward, sparkling like diamonds in the ring light. Bianca stared at the broken glass, her breathing shallow and fast. Clean it up, I said, turning back to the fruit. And Bianca, do not worry about the fruit platters. I will make them look expensive. Just make sure you pick up the phone when Mom calls. I have a feeling she is going to have some questions about her credit score. I picked up the knife again. Slice. Bianca turned and ran out of the kitchen, the sound of her heels retreating like gunfire. I looked down at the perfect apple wedge in my hand. One debt exposed. But the foreclosure notice I had seen on the table was the real weapon, and I was saving that one for the main event. I took a bite of the apple. It was crisp, sweet. I had work to do. The rehearsal dinner was held in the formal dining room under the heavy crystal chandelier that my grandmother had bought in Paris 40 years ago. The table was set with the good china, the gold-rimmed plates that were usually reserved for Christmas and Easter, but tonight they were being used to massage the ego of my brother-in-law Kyle. The air was thick with the smell of roast beef and the heavier scent of desperation. I sat at the far end of the table, the spot traditionally reserved for children or unwanted guests. To my left was an empty chair where my grandmother should have been, but she had claimed a headache and retired early. I knew better. She was upstairs, probably watching Netflix and waiting for my signal. To my right sat my mother, Patricia, who was currently looking at me with a mixture of suspicion and distaste, as if I were a stain on the tablecloth that she could not scrub out. But the star of the show was Kyle. He sat at the head of the table in my grandfather's chair, swirling a glass of expensive Cabernet that he had undoubtedly charged to my grandmother's account. He had been talking for 20 minutes straight. He had not asked anyone a single question. He had not asked about my flight or my life in Chicago. He had spent the entire time lecturing the table on the future of finance. "You just do not get it, Patricia," he said, leaning back and unbuttoning his suit jacket to accommodate the meal he had just devoured. "The dollar is dead. Fiat currency is for losers. The future is the blockchain. It is decentralized. It is untraceable. It is freedom." My mother nodded enthusiastically. Her eyes glazed over. She did not understand a word he was saying, but she understood the tone. He sounded confident. He sounded rich, and for Patricia Walker, sounding rich was just as good as being rich. Bianca sat next to him, pushing peas around her plate. She looked pale. Every time Kyle said the word money, she flinched slightly. She knew the truth. She knew about the foreclosure notices I had found in the kitchen. But she stayed silent, terrified that if she spoke, the illusion would shatter. Kyle turned his gaze toward me. His eyes were glassy from the wine and filled with a predatory amusement. He saw me sitting there in my simple black dress sipping water, and he saw a target. He saw the poor divorced sister-in-law, the failure, the charity case. He saw someone he could impress, someone he could save. "Simone," he said, his voice booming across the centerpiece. "You have been quiet tonight, still crunching numbers in that little cubicle of yours." I set my glass down. "I am just listening, Kyle. It is fascinating." He smirked. "I bet it is. It must be hard for you living on a fixed income, watching inflation eat away at your paycheck. I know how it is for people in your bracket. You save a few $100s and think you are doing well, and then boom, the cost of living spikes and you are back to zero." I kept my face perfectly neutral. My bracket. If he only knew that my tax bracket was 2 levels above his, even on his best year. "Actually, I am doing okay," I said softly, playing the role. "I get by." Kyle laughed, shaking his head. "Getting by. That is the problem with your mindset, Simone. You are content with mediocrity. You work for money instead of making money work for you. You are trading time for dollars. That is a loser's game." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Look, I like you, Simone. You are family. And I hate to see you struggling like this. I know the divorce left you with nothing. So I want to help you. I want to make you a one-time offer because I am feeling generous tonight." I felt my phone in my lap. I quietly slid my thumb over the screen, unlocking it. I opened the voice memo app. I tapped the red button. The timer started counting up. 001, 002. "What kind of offer?" I asked, widening my eyes in feigned innocence. Kyle took a swig of wine. "If you can scrape together $5,000 maybe from your savings, or you can sell that old car you drive, I will invest it for you. I have an in with a new coin that is about to launch. It is going to the moon, Simone. We are talking 10 times returns in a month. I can turn that 5,000 into 50,000 by Christmas. Consider it charity for my favorite sister-in-law." My mother gasped, clapping her hands together. "Oh, Kyle, that is so incredibly generous of you. Simone, did you hear that? He is willing to manage your money. You should thank him. You should transfer the money tonight." I looked at the phone recording in my lap. Then I looked at Kyle. "Wow," I said, my voice trembling slightly with fake gratitude. $50,000. That would change my life. It would." Kyle agreed, looking satisfied. "It would get you out of that cramped apartment, maybe get you some decent clothes." "But I have a question," I said, furrowing my brow. "I read somewhere that crypto is complicated when it comes to taxes. I mean, if I make $50,000, won't the IRS want half of it?" "I cannot afford to get audited, Kyle. I'm just a regular employee." Kyle waved his hand dismissively. "Taxes. That is cute. You are thinking like a poor person, Simone. The whole point of this system is that it exists outside the system." I leaned in closer, resting my chin on my hand. "I do not understand," I said. "Does the exchange not send a form to the government? A 1099K or something?" Kyle let out a loud, arrogant sigh. He looked at my mother as if to say, "Can you believe how dense she is?" "Simone, listen to me," he said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "The exchange I use is not in the US. It is decentralized. There is no KYC. Know your customer. They do not have my social security number. They do not have my name. It is just a wallet address. A string of numbers." I nodded slowly, keeping the phone angled toward him. "So you are saying the government does not know the money is there?" I asked. "Exactly," he said, grinning. "It is invisible wealth. I moved 100 grand through it last month, and on paper I am practically destitute. That is how you win the game. You keep the profits, and you give the government nothing. Why do you think we are driving a Benz while you are driving a rental?" I felt a chill of professional satisfaction. There it was, a confession, clear as day. "But isn't that illegal?" I asked. pushing just a little bit further. I mean, isn't that tax evasion? Kyle laughed again, a harsh sound. It is only illegal if you get caught, he said, winking at me. And who is going to catch me? You. He sat back, looking proud of himself. Besides, he added, the government steals from us every day. This is just taking it back. So what do you say? Do you want in, or do you want to stay poor forever? I looked at the timer on my phone. 2 minutes and 14 seconds. I had him admitting to using offshore decentralized exchanges to hide assets and evade taxes. In the world of forensic accounting, this was a slam dunk. This was the kind of evidence that turned a civil audit into a criminal indictment. I picked up my phone and stopped the recording. I saved the file, named it Kyle Confession, and uploaded it to the cloud immediately. I smiled at him. A real smile this time. I think I will pass, Kyle, I said. I prefer to keep my money where I can see it. And where the IRS can see it too. I am funny that way. Kyle's face fell. The rejection stung him more than the accusation. You are an idiot, he spat. I try to hand you a lifeline and you slap it away. This is why you are alone, Simone. You have no vision, no courage. Suddenly, a hand slammed down on the table. Enough, my mother screamed. I jumped slightly. Patricia's face was red, her chest heaving. She was glaring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. Stop it, Simone, she hissed. Stop interrogating him. Who do you think you are, coming into this house and questioning Kyle's business acumen? He is a financial genius. He is trying to help you because he pities you, and you sit there asking about forms and taxes like a jealous, petty little girl. Mom, I started to say, but she cut me off. No, she shouted. I will not hear it. You are jealous. You have always been jealous of Bianca. You are jealous that she found a man who is successful and ambitious, while your husband left you because you were too boring. You cannot stand to see them happy. You cannot stand to see them rich. She gestured around the room. Look at this life, Simone. Look at what Kyle provides. And look at you. You are bitter. If you are not going to be grateful, then keep your mouth shut. I looked at Bianca. She was staring at her plate, tears silently streaming down her face. She knew. She knew exactly how successful Kyle was. She knew they were one payment away from homelessness. But she said nothing. She let our mother scream at me. She let our mother defend the man who was dragging them all into ruin. I looked back at my mother. I am not jealous, Mom, I said quietly, standing up. And I am not boring. I am just observant. I picked up my water glass. I am going to bed. I have a lot of work to do tomorrow for the party. I turned and walked out of the dining room. Behind me, I heard Kyle scoff. Unbelievable, he muttered. Some people just want to be victims. I walked up the grand staircase, my hand gripping the banister. I could still hear my mother apologizing to Kyle, assuring him that I didn't mean it, that I was just socially awkward. I reached the top of the stairs and walked down the hallway to the guest room. I closed the door and locked it. I pulled out my phone and played back the recording. Kyle's voice filled the room, clear and arrogant. It is only illegal if you get caught. I opened my email. I typed in a new address. This one did not belong to my boss or to the family lawyer. It belonged to a contact I had made 3 years ago during a seminar in Washington, D.C., a senior agent at the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. Subject tip regarding tax evasion. Kyle Miller. I attached the audio file. I attached the photos of the foreclosure notices. I attached the screenshots from the group chat where he discussed hiding assets. I hesitated for only a second. I thought about Bianca crying into her peas. I thought about my mother's blind adoration. Then I thought about the word charity case. I thought about the bet on my divorce. I thought about the years of being made to feel small. I hit send. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. The party was tomorrow night. The IRS moves slow usually. But when you hand them a confession on a silver platter, they can move surprisingly fast. Sleep well, Kyle, I whispered to the empty room, because tomorrow the market is going to crash. The house was finally silent. After the shouting match at dinner and the slamming of doors, the Walker estate had settled into an uneasy truce. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, its deep resonance vibrating through the floorboards. I sat in the guest room listening to the house breathe. I knew the layout of this place better than I knew my own apartment in Chicago. I knew which floorboards creaked on the landing. I knew which door hinges needed oil. And I knew that my mother and sister were heavy sleepers, especially after consuming 2 bottles of Chardonnay to drown out the reality of their financial ruin. I waited 10 more minutes, just to be safe. Then I grabbed the thick black binder from my laptop bag. This was the result of 3 hours of compiling, printing, and organizing evidence. It was heavy, dense with bank statements, credit reports, and IRS filings. It was the physical manifestation of their betrayal. I opened my door, inching it quiet. The hallway was dark, illuminated only by the moonlight filtering through the palladium window at the top of the stairs. I moved like a ghost. I was not the clumsy little girl they remembered. I was a predator moving through the dark. I walked past my mother's room, hearing the faint sound of her snoring. I walked past the master suite where Bianca and Kyle were staying, hearing nothing but a heavy, oppressive silence. I reached the end of the hall, the door to the master suite of the East Wing, Grandma Hattie's room. My hand hovered over the brass knob. My heart gave a squeeze of anxiety. The last time I had seen her, she had been sitting in a wheelchair, looking frail and confused, staring out the window, while Bianca talked over her head like she wasn't there. The family narrative was that her mind was going, that the dementia was setting in, aggressive and fast, that she had good days and bad days, but mostly bad days. I turned the knob slowly and pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit by a lamp on the bedside table. The air smelled of lavender and old paper smells that I associated with comfort and safety. But there was another smell underneath it, something sharp and oaky. I stepped inside and closed the door softly behind me. "Grandma," I whispered. The figure in the wingback chair by the window did not jump. She did not look confused. She turned slowly, the leather of the chair creaking. Grandma Hattie was sitting with her legs crossed at the ankles. She was wearing her silk sleeping bonnet and a velvet robe. In one hand, she held a crystal tumbler filled with amber liquid. In the other hand, she held an iPad Pro. She looked at me over the rim of her reading glasses. Her eyes were not cloudy. They were sharp, clear, and dancing with a mischievous light. She took a slow sip of the drink, savoring it. Then she set the glass down on the side table next to the bottle of Hennessy Parodies. Finally, she said, her voice strong and steady, devoid of the tremulous shake she used in front of the others. "You certainly took your time, child. I thought I was going to have to pretend to be deaf for another 10 years before you came home." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. A smile broke across my face, genuine and wide. "Grandma," I said, walking toward her. You are okay," she snorted, tapping the screen of her iPad. "I am better than okay, Simone. I am up 12% on my tech stocks this quarter, although I am worried about the bond market." She gestured to the ottoman in front of her chair. "Sit down and pour yourself a drink. You look like you need it after dealing with that circus downstairs." I poured a small amount of cognac into a second glass and sat down at her feet, just like I used to when I was a child. "So it is an act," I said, looking up at her. "The dementia, the wheelchair, the silence. It is a survival strategy," she corrected me. "When your husband died, God rest his soul, I realized something. People stop listening to old women. They start talking about us instead of to us. And then when the money is involved, they start circling like vultures." She leaned forward, her face hardening. "I wanted to see who they really were, Simone. Not who they pretended to be when they wanted a check. I wanted to know what they said when they thought I couldn't hear. And let me tell you, Listening to your mother and sister for the last 2 years has been an education in disappointment. I nodded, looking down at the amber liquid in my glass. They think you are gone, I said. Bianca, she is planning something. I know, Hattie said, waving her hand dismissively. The power of attorney. She thinks she is subtle. She has been leaving brochures for assisted living facilities on my nightstand for months. The Meadows. Sunset Hills. Places where they warehouse old people so they can sell the house and spend the equity. She took another sip of her drink. Tomorrow is the big day, isn't it? The lawyer is coming, not my Arthur, but some strip mall ambulance chaser Bianca hired. They are going to declare me mentally incompetent right before the cake is cut. I gripped the glass tighter. They are desperate, Grandma. It is not just greed. It is panic. I reached for the black binder I had placed on the floor. I lifted it onto my lap. I brought something for you. Hattie looked at the binder. Her expression shifted from amusement to seriousness. What is this? She asked. It is the truth, I said, passing it to her. She opened the cover. The first page was a summary spreadsheet I had created. I explained as she read. Bianca has been skimming from the household accounts for 3 years. She lists it as medical expenses and home maintenance. But if you look at the vendors, they are shell companies. B&K Consulting, Lux Living LLC. They all trace back to bank accounts owned by Kyle. Hattie turned the page, her finger tracing the rows of numbers. And here I pointed to a highlighted section. The nursing care. They told you the insurance wasn't covering the physical therapy anymore, right? That is why they fired Mrs. Higgins and hired that cheap agency. Hattie nodded slowly. They said premiums went up. They said the estate was cash poor. They lied. I said, my voice trembling with anger. The insurance covers 100%. The money they withdrew for private care went straight to pay off Kyle's gambling debts in Las Vegas. And the $25,000 I sent, the money for the extra treatments, I never saw a dime of it. Hattie finished the sentence for me. She closed the binder. She did not slam it. She closed it with a gentle finality. She placed her hand on the cover. Her hand was shaking slightly now, but not from age. From rage. My own flesh and blood, she whispered. I knew they were selfish. I knew they were entitled. But I did not think they were criminals. I did not think they would steal the medicine out of my cabinet. She looked out the window into the dark night. Your grandfather built this house with his bare hands. He worked 2 jobs. We saved every penny. We wanted to build a legacy, a safety net for the family. And they are treating it like a piggy bank they can smash open. She turned back to me. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set like stone. Thank you, Simone. Thank you for showing me exactly how deep the rot goes. She reached down beside her chair. There was a leather satchel tucked away in the shadows. She pulled it out. It was old, worn leather smelling of history. You brought me a weapon, she said, handing the satchel to me. So I am giving you one in return. I took the satchel. It was heavy. I opened the clasp. Inside was a thick document bound in blue legal paper. The paper was yellowed at the edges, but the seal was fresh. This is the original will, I asked. No. Hattie said, a small smile returning to her lips. That is the old will. The one that left everything to Patricia with instructions to care for the girls. That will is in the shredder. This, she tapped the leather case, is the living trust. I had Arthur draft it 6 months ago when I caught Bianca trying to sell my diamond earrings. But I didn't sign it. I wasn't sure. I kept hoping I was wrong. I kept hoping that maybe there was a misunderstanding. She looked me dead in the eye. But tonight you proved there is no misunderstanding. They are not confused, Simone. They are predatory. She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was iron. I want you to be the executor. I want you to be the trustee. Everything. The house, the portfolio, the land in South Carolina, it all goes into the trust, and you hold the keys. My breath hitched. Grandma, this is This is millions of dollars. They will fight this. They will say you were coerced. They will say I manipulated you. Let them say it, Hattie said fiercely. Let them scream it from the rooftops. Because tomorrow, when I walk out on that stage, I am going to show them exactly how sound my mind is. She leaned back in her chair, looking like a queen on her throne. Here is the plan. Tomorrow morning, I will be the frail old woman they want. I will sit in my wheelchair. I will drool a little if I have to. I will let them parade me around like a show pony. I will let them bring their lawyer. I will let them put the pen in my hand. She grinned a wolfish grin that made me realize exactly where I got my killer instinct from. And just when they think they have won, just when they think the ink is dry, that is when we play the slideshow. She pointed to the iPad. I saw what you did with the group chat messages. Arthur told me. It is brilliant. But we need to add the financial records to the presentation. Can you do that? I smiled. The forensic accountant in me was already visualizing the slides. I can have it ready by morning, I said. I will overlay their text messages with the bank statements. We will show the cause and effect, the insults and the theft side by side. Good, Hattie said. She picked up her glass again. She raised it in the air. The crystal caught the lamplight. To family, she said, her voice thick with irony. May we know them. May we raise them. And occasionally may we audit them. I raised my glass. To the audit. We clinked glasses. The sound was a sharp, clear bell in the quiet room. We sat there for another hour plotting. We went over the timeline. We discussed the security. I told her about the bodyguards I had hired to pose as catering staff, just in case Kyle got violent. Hattie told me about the secret safe in the library, where she kept the jewelry Bianca hadn't found yet. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the outcast. I didn't feel like the charity case. I felt like a partner. I felt like a walker, the real kind. The kind that builds and protects, not the kind that destroys and consumes. Go to sleep now, child, Hattie said, finally seeing me yawn. You have a big day tomorrow. You have fruit to cut, remember? I laughed, standing up and kissing her on the forehead. I will make the best fruit platter they have ever seen, I promised. I walked to the door. I paused and looked back. She was still sitting there, the iPad glowing on her face, the empty glass of cognac on the table. She didn't look frail. She looked formidable. Grandma, I said. She looked up. Tomorrow is going to be hard, I said, watching them fall. Hattie shook her head. No, Simone. Watching them fall would be hard if they were climbing. But they are not climbing. They are digging. We are just taking away the shovels. Tomorrow, she said, turning off the lamp and plunging the room into darkness. Tomorrow will be a good play. Now get out of here before you wake the rats. I slipped out into the hallway. The silence was still there, but it didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt like the calm before the storm. I walked back to my room, clutching the leather satchel to my chest. I slept deeper that night than I had in years. I dreamed of balance sheets and justice. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of waking up. The morning sun filtered through the silk curtains of the guest room, casting long golden shadows across the floorboards. It was the kind of morning that should have been peaceful. The birds were singing in the oak trees outside, and the smell of blooming magnolias drifted in through the cracked window. But inside the Walker estate, peace was a foreign concept. The air in the house was vibrating with a frantic, manic energy. I could hear footsteps pounding up and down the hallway, shouting voices from the kitchen, and the distant sound of a vacuum cleaner running for the third time in the same spot. I lay in bed for a moment longer, staring at the ceiling. Today was the day. Today was the day Grandma Hattie turned 80. Today was the day Bianca and Kyle planned to steal her legacy. And today was the day I burned their house of cards to the ground. My peaceful contemplation was shattered when my bedroom door flew open. There was no knock. There was never a knock with Bianca. Privacy was a privilege reserved for the winners in this family, and in her eyes, I was still the loser. Bianca stood in the doorway, holding a plastic dry cleaning bag. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red-rimmed despite the heavy concealer she had already applied, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing a silk robe that looked expensive from a distance, but up close, I could see a small tear near the pocket. It was a perfect metaphor for her life. "Wake up, Simone," she said, her voice shrill and tight. "We have 6 hours until guests arrive and you are still in bed. I told you this is not a vacation." I sat up slowly, pulling the duvet up to my chest. "Good morning to you too, Bianca. I was just getting up." She marched into the room, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood. She threw the plastic bag onto the foot of the bed. It landed with a soft rustle. "Here," she said, pointing a manicured finger at the bag. "Put this on." I reached out and pulled the plastic away. Inside was a pair of black polyester trousers and a stiff white button-down shirt. It was a uniform. A waiter's uniform. The fabric felt cheap and scratchy against my fingertips. There was a small logo embroidered on the pocket of the shirt that said staff. "What is this?" I asked, keeping my voice calm, even though my blood was starting to boil. "It is the dress code," Bianca said, crossing her arms, "for the help." She walked over to the mirror and began inspecting her own reflection, picking at an invisible flaw on her chin. "Look, Simone, we have over 200 guests coming. Important people. Senators, investors. The kind of people who judge you by your shoes. I cannot have you wandering around in your department store clearance rack dresses. It confuses the aesthetic." She turned back to me, her expression hard and cold. "I want the guests to be clear on who is who. I am the hostess. Kyle is the host. Mom is the matriarch. And you are family support. You are helping the caterers. So you need to look like the caterers." "Family support." I repeated the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. "So you want me to wear a uniform at my own grandmother's birthday party?" Bianca rolled her eyes, letting out an exasperated sigh. "Don't make this about your ego, Simone. It is about logistics. If people see you in regular clothes, they might try to talk to you. They might ask you what you do for a living. And honestly, I do not want to have to explain that my sister does data entry and lives in a studio apartment. It is embarrassing. This way, if you are wearing the uniform, they will just ask you for a refill on their champagne and move on. It is better for everyone." She looked at me, waiting for a fight. She wanted me to cry. She wanted me to beg. She wanted me to argue so she could crush me again, so she could remind me of my place in the hierarchy. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I looked at the cheap polyester uniform and then I looked at her. I saw the tremor in her hands. I saw the way her eyes darted around the room, unable to focus. She was terrified. She was terrified that if I looked like her, equal people might realize she wasn't special. She needed me to be the servant, so she could be the queen. Her entire identity was built on the foundation of my inferiority. If I wasn't beneath her, then where was she? I took a deep breath and forced a smile onto my face. "Okay, Bianca," I said. She blinked, surprised by my surrender. "Okay?" she asked, suspicious. "Yes," I said, shrugging. "You are right. It makes sense. I am here to help. I do not want to distract the investors. I will wear the uniform." Bianca let out a breath, her shoulders relaxing slightly. She smiled a triumphant smirk that did not reach her eyes. "Good. I am glad you are finally learning to be a team player. Be downstairs in 30 minutes. And tie your hair back. We do not want loose hair near the food." She turned and walked out of the room, leaving the door wide open behind her. I waited until I heard her footsteps fade down the hallway. I waited until I heard her yelling at Kyle about the flower arrangements. Then I got out of bed and walked to the door. I closed it gently. I turned the lock. Click. I walked back to the bed and picked up the uniform. I held it up, looking at the shapeless trousers and the stiff collar. It was a costume designed to erase a person. It was designed to make someone invisible. I walked over to the trash can in the corner of the room. I dropped the uniform inside. Not today, Bianca, I whispered. I walked to the closet. In the back, pushed behind my hanging toiletries bag, was a long black garment bag. I had brought it with me on the plane, carrying it myself so it wouldn't get crushed in the overhead bin. I unzipped the bag slowly, savoring the sound. The fabric inside shimmered even in the dim light of the closet. It was emerald green, deep, rich, and vibrant. The color of money, the color of envy, the color of power. I pulled the dress out and laid it on the bed. It was a custom piece tailored specifically for my body. The silk was heavy and luxurious, cool to the touch. The bodice was hand-beaded with thousands of tiny emerald crystals that caught the light and scattered it like green fire. It had a high slit up the left leg and a plunging neckline that was daring but elegant. It cost $5,000. I had bought it in Chicago 3 weeks ago, the day after I closed the pharmaceutical case. I had walked into the boutique not as a charity case, but as a woman who had just earned a 6-figure commission. I ran my hand over the beading. Bianca thought she could put me in a box. She thought she could label me staff, and I would just accept it. She didn't understand that I had spent the last 8 years breaking out of boxes. I went into the bathroom and started my transformation. I didn't tie my hair back. I let it down using a curling wand to create loose, voluminous waves that cascaded over my shoulders. I didn't wear the minimal makeup suitable for a servant. I applied a smoky eye using gold and green shadows to make my eyes pop. I put on the deep crimson lipstick again, the shade called Vendetta. I put on my jewelry. Not the cheap costume jewelry my mother always criticized, but real gold. A delicate chain with a diamond pendant, stud earrings that sparkled with authentic clarity. Then I stepped into the dress. The silk slid over my skin like water. It fit perfectly, hugging every curve, emphasizing the strength I had built in my body over years of Pilates and discipline. I zipped it up, the sound finalizing my decision. I stepped into my heels, 4-inch stilettos with red soles. I walked out of the bathroom and stood in front of the full-length mirror in the bedroom. The woman staring back at me was not Simone, the charity case. She was not Simone, the divorced failure. She was not Simone, the data entry clerk. She was Simone Walker, the woman who hunted criminals for a living. The woman who could look at a spreadsheet and see a lie. The woman who held the future of this family in a leather satchel. I looked at the trash can where the uniform lay in a crumpled heap. Bianca wanted me to blend in. She wanted me to be part of the background scenery so she could shine in the foreground. She was so afraid of being overshadowed that she tried to dim my light before I even entered the room. But you cannot dim a fire with a polyester shirt. I checked the time. It was almost noon. The guests would be arriving soon. The investors, the senators, the old money families, they would all be downstairs expecting to see the Walker family dynasty on display. They were going to get a show, all right. I imagined Bianca's face when I walked down those stairs. I imagined the confusion, the anger, and then the fear. She would realize in that moment that she had lost control. She would realize that the sister she had bullied and belittled was gone, and in her place stood a stranger she didn't recognize. I picked up the leather satchel containing Grandma Hattie's will and the black binder of evidence. I held them like a clutch purse against my hip. I took one last look in the mirror. I straightened my spine, lifting my chin. Bianca said I was family support. She said I was there to help. Well, I am going to help. I am going to help Grandma take back her life. I am going to help the truth come to light. And I am going to help myself to a glass of that expensive champagne. Today, support will become main character. I unlocked the bedroom door and stepped out into the hallway. The house was loud with the noise of the party preparation, but as I walked toward the stairs, the sound of my heels on the floorboards echoed like a drumbeat of war. I was ready. The sound of a live jazz quartet floated up the staircase, a smooth, sophisticated rhythm that was meant to signal wealth and taste. I stood at the top of the landing, listening to the murmur of voices below. It was the specific hum of a high society gathering, the polite laughter, the clinking of crystal glasses, the low buzz of networking. To anyone else, it sounded like a party. To me, it sounded like a battlefield. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool air of the upper hallway one last time before descending into the humidity of my family's deception. I smoothed my hands over the emerald silk of my dress, feeling the cool bite of the crystals beneath my fingertips. This was not just a piece of clothing. It was a declaration of war. I took the first step. My heel struck the hardwood with a deliberate audible click. Then the next, and the next. The staircase in my grandmother's house was designed for grand entrances. It curved elegantly down into the foyer, framing whoever was descending in a spotlight of natural illumination from the chandelier above. Usually, Bianca claimed this moment. She would make everyone wait until the room was full, and then she would glide down expecting applause. But today, the stage was mine. I reached the curve of the stairs where the view of the foyer opened up. The space was packed. There were men in bespoke tuxedos and women in designer gowns holding flutes of champagne that my sister could not afford. I saw the investors Bianca was desperate to impress. I saw the local politicians Kyle was trying to bribe with donations he didn't have. And then they saw me. It started as a ripple. The guests nearest the stairs looked up, drawn by the movement and the flash of green against the white walls. Their conversations trailed off. They nudged their neighbors, heads turned, eyes widened. The silence spread through the room like a wave moving from the foyer into the living room, until the only sound left was the jazz band playing in the corner and the rhythmic click of my heels. I kept my chin high, my expression serene and unbreathable. I did not look at the guests. I looked through them, focusing on a point on the far wall. I felt their gazes sliding over the silk, assessing the fit, estimating the cost, realizing that this was not the attire of a poor relation. At the bottom of the stairs, standing near the entrance to the ballroom, were the three gatekeepers of my misery: Kyle, Bianca, and my mother, Patricia. They were huddled together in a tight circle, probably congratulating themselves on the turnout. Bianca was the first to notice the change in the room's atmosphere. She turned her head, following the gaze of the crowd. When her eyes landed on me, her mouth actually fell open. The glass of champagne in her hand tilted dangerously. She looked at the emerald dress hugging my curves, the diamond pendant resting against my collarbone, and the cascading waves of my hair. For a second, she didn't even recognize me. She looked at me with the envy one reserves for a stranger who has everything you want. Then recognition hit. And with it came a contortion of rage so violent it ruined her carefully applied contouring. She grabbed Kyle's arm, digging her nails into his tuxedo jacket. Kyle spun around, his eyes bugged out. He looked like a fish that had been slapped onto a dock, gasping for air. I reached the bottom step. I paused, one hand resting lightly on the banister, posing for a picture that no one was taking but everyone was seeing. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the stunned silence. The spell broke. Kyle surged forward, moving with a speed I didn't know he possessed. He closed the distance between us in 3 strides, placing his body between me and the main room, trying to block me from view like a human shield. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed, his face inches from mine. His breath smelled of expensive scotch and fear. I smiled at him, a cool, detached smile. "I am joining the party, Kyle. Is that not what guests do?" "You are not a guest," he spat, veins bulging in his neck. "You are staff. We told you to wear the uniform. We told you to stay in the kitchen. Look at you. You look ridiculous. You are making a spectacle of yourself." "I think I look appropriate for the occasion," I countered, glancing over his shoulder at the staring crowd. "Black tie optional, right?" I chose optional. "You are embarrassing Bianca," he whispered furiously. "You are trying to upstage her on her big night. Go upstairs right now. Take that thing off. Put on the uniform or get out." "I mean it, Simone. I will have security drag you out." I laughed, soft and low. "Your security team is a group of college kids you hired for $15 an hour, Kyle." I don't think they are going to touch me. And if you touch me well, we both know I have a lawyer on speed dial. And unlike yours, mine actually passed the bar exam on the first try. Kyle's face turned a shade of purple that clashed horribly with his tie. He opened his mouth to scream, but before he could, my mother materialized at my elbow. Patricia Walker did not hiss. She did not whisper. She attacked. She grabbed my upper arm, her fingers digging into my flesh with a strength that was shocking. She squeezed hard enough to bruise, trying to physically steer me toward the service corridor. "You ungrateful little brat," she muttered through clenched teeth, smiling fake smiles at the guests as she tried to manhandle me. "How dare you?" She continued, her voice a low growl in my ear. "How dare you pull a stunt like this? We give you a plane ticket. We invite you into our home. And this is how you repay us, by trying to ruin everything." I planted my feet. I refuse to move. I am stronger than I look. Years of carrying the weight of their expectations had built a different kind of muscle. "Let go of me, mother," I said, my voice icy. "You will go to the kitchen immediately," she ordered, tightening her grip. "You will chop fruit, and you will refill glasses, and you will stay out of sight. You are nothing but a distraction, Simone. Look at everyone staring. They are laughing at you. They are wondering why the charity case is playing dress-up in a rented gown." I looked at the crowd. They weren't laughing. They were intrigued. They were whispering, but not the kind of whispers my mother imagined. "I am not going to the kitchen," I said, pulling my arm free from her grasp with a sharp jerk. "And this gown is not rented. I own it. Just like I own my life, something you seem to have forgotten." Bianca joined the fray, her eyes wet with angry tears. "You are ruining it," she whined, her voice pitching up. "You always do this. You have to make everything about you. Why cannot you just be supportive for once? Why cannot you just know your place?" "My place?" I asked, looking at the three of them. "And where is that Bianca? Beneath you, behind you, cleaning up your messes while you take the credit." "Yes," my mother snapped. "That is exactly where you belong, because that is all you are good for. Now move, before I make a scene that you will regret for the rest of your miserable life." The tension in the small circle was electric. It was a standoff. They were banking on my old programming. They were banking on the Simone who wanted to please the Simone who was afraid of conflict, the Simone who would shrink away to keep the peace. But that Simone had stayed in Chicago. I was about to respond. I was about to unleash the first truth bomb of the evening. But suddenly a voice boomed from the crowd, a deep baritone voice that commanded authority. "Ms. Walker, is that you?" We all froze. Kyle looked around wildly. Bianca wiped her eyes. My mother smoothed her dress instantly, composing her face into a mask of gracious hospitality. A man stepped out of the crowd. He was tall, with silver hair and a bearing that screamed old money. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, and he walked with the easy confidence of a man who owned skyscrapers. I recognized him immediately. It was impossible not to. It was Mr. Marcus Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Global, one of the largest private equity firms in the country. And more importantly, he was a client of my firm in Chicago. I had worked on a minor audit for one of his subsidiaries last year, but I never expected him to remember me. He walked straight past Kyle, who was already reaching out a hand to introduce himself. He walked straight past Bianca, who had put on her best smile. He walked straight past my mother. He stopped in front of me. "Mr. Sterling," I said, extending my hand, my professional persona snapping into place instantly. "It is a surprise to see you here." He took my hand, shaking it firmly. "The surprise is mine, Simone," he said, smiling warmly. "I didn't know you had family in Atlanta. When I saw the name Walker on the invitation, I didn't make the connection. I assumed it was a common name. But then I saw you come down those stairs." He turned to the group of guests, who had gathered around, listening intently. "You know," he said, addressing the room but keeping his hand on my shoulder, "I have worked with a lot of financial minds in my career. But this woman right here is sharp as a tack. The way she handled that restructuring audit for us last quarter was nothing short of brilliant. He looked back at me, his eyes twinkling. I heard the rumors at the firm, Simone. They are saying you are on the short list for the CFO position at the new division. Is it true? Because if it is, I might have to double my investment just to keep you on my accounts. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. This was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of a paradigm shift. I looked at my family. Bianca's mouth was open again, but this time no sound came out. She looked like she had been struck by lightning. CFO. The letters hung in the air above her head, mocking her influencer dreams. My mother looked confused. She blinked rapidly, trying to process the information. Her daughter, the data entry clerk, was being praised by a billionaire. It didn't fit the narrative. It didn't fit the script she had written for me. And Kyle. Kyle looked sick. The color had drained from his face completely, leaving him a pale, sweaty mess. He knew who Marcus Sterling was. He had probably spent months trying to get a meeting with him. And here was Marcus Sterling ignoring him to praise the woman Kyle had tried to send to the kitchen. I smiled at Mr. Sterling. Discussions are ongoing, I said smoothly. But I appreciate the vote of confidence, Marcus. It means a lot coming from you. Well, you deserve it, he said. Are you staying in town long? We should grab lunch. I have a project in Tokyo I want your eyes on. I would love that, I said. Mr. Sterling nodded, then finally seemed to notice the 3 statues standing next to me. Oh, forgive me, he said. These must be your relatives. He looked at Kyle, waiting for an introduction. Kyle cleared his throat. It sounded like a death rattle. He looked at Mr. Sterling, then he looked at me. I could see the wheels turning in his head. I could see the panic. He couldn't admit he was wrong. He couldn't admit that he had just tried to throw a future CFO out the back door. He had to maintain the lie. He had to double down. Yes, Kyle stammered, his smile stretching tight and thin across his face. I am Kyle Miller, Simone's brother-in-law, and this is her sister Bianca. He let out a nervous laugh, shifting his weight from foot to foot. You will have to forgive us, Mr. Sterling. I think there has been a bit of a misunderstanding. You might have Simone confused with someone else. Mr. Sterling frowned, his eyebrows drawing together. Confused? I don't think so. This is Simone Walker, from Deloitte and Touche. Kyle waved his hand dismissively, ignoring the danger signs. Oh, Simone works in Chicago, yes, Kyle said, his voice patronizing and loud. But she does data entry, basic clerical work. You know, filing, organizing spreadsheets. She is very good at it, of course. Very diligent. But CFO. He laughed again, looking around the room for support. I think you must be thinking of her boss. Simone tends to exaggerate her role sometimes. It is a family trait we are trying to help her with. She has a bit of an active imagination. The air left the room. Mr. Sterling's face went cold. He looked at Kyle with the expression one might use when stepping on a cockroach. He looked at the sweat on Kyle's forehead. He looked at the desperation in his eyes. Then he looked at me. He raised an eyebrow. Data entry, he repeated flatly. I looked at Kyle. I looked at the way he was pleading with me, with his eyes begging me to play along, begging me to be small so he could remain big. I took a sip of the air, tasting the victory. Actually, Kyle? I said, my voice soft but carrying to every corner of the foyer. I was promoted 3 years ago, around the same time you lost your license to sell commercial real estate. I turned back to Mr. Sterling. Kyle is the one with the imagination, I said. He likes to tell jokes, but sometimes he forgets the punchline. Mr. Sterling didn't laugh. He just stared at Kyle for a long, uncomfortable second. I see, he said. Well, nice to meet you. He turned his back on Kyle, completely cutting him out of existence. Simone, he said, offering me his arm. Let's go get a drink. I want to hear more about that restructuring. I took his arm. I felt the silk of my dress brush against his tuxedo. I stepped forward, leaving my family standing in the foyer, frozen in their humiliation. As we walked away, I heard my mother whisper to Bianca, "What just happened?" I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I knew exactly what happened. The hierarchy had just crumbled, and we hadn't even started the slideshow yet. The transition from the foyer to the ballroom was a study in cognitive dissonance. The guests who had witnessed the confrontation at the entrance were whispering behind their hands, their eyes darting between me and my family with hungry curiosity. But the majority of the room was still blissfully unaware. They were drinking vintage champagne and eating canapés, unaware that they were standing in the middle of a crime scene. I stood near a marble pillar, sipping a glass of sparkling water and watching my family regroup. They were huddled in the corner like a sports team that was losing the championship game. Kyle was wiping sweat from his forehead with a cocktail napkin. My mother was aggressively whispering instructions to a terrified waiter. And Bianca was fixing her makeup again, trying to plaster the mask of the perfect hostess back onto her crumbling reality. I checked my watch. It was time. The main event was scheduled to begin, and I knew exactly what was on the agenda. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight swung across the room, searching for its target before landing on the small stage at the front. The jazz band faded out, replaced by a pre-recorded orchestral swell that sounded inspirational but slightly cheap. Bianca stepped into the light. She had recovered her composure, at least superficially. She held a microphone in one hand, and her other hand rested theatrically over her heart. She looked out at the sea of faces blinking against the glare. "Welcome, everyone," she said, her voice trembling with a manufactured emotion that I recognized immediately. "It is so beautiful to see you all here to celebrate the matriarch of our family, my grandmother, Hattie Walker." There was polite applause. I did not clap. I watched. Bianca waited for the applause to die down. She looked down at the floor, as if overcome with love, and then looked back up, smiling brave through the tears. "Grandma has always been our rock," she continued. "She built this legacy from nothing. She took care of us when we were small. But as we all know, time is a thief, and lately we have seen our strong rock begin to weather." A murmur of sympathy went through the crowd. It was disgusting. She was eulogizing a woman who was sitting 10 feet away, fully conscious, and probably smarter than everyone in the room combined. "It has been hard for the family," Bianca went on, her voice dropping to a whisper. "To watch her struggle. To watch her forget names. To watch the confusion cloud those beautiful eyes. It is a heavy burden, but one we carry with love." I gripped my glass tighter. The narrative was being spun in real time. She was painting Grandma as an invalid, a husk of a person who needed protection. And of course, who better to protect her than the granddaughter who owed American Express $45,000. That is why Bianca said, her voice strengthening, finding a new resolve. "Tonight is not just a birthday party. It is a transition, a passing of the torch, because the greatest gift we can give Grandma Hattie is the gift of peace, the gift of rest. We want her to enjoy her twilight years without the stress of managing estates and finances." She gestured to the side of the stage. "Please welcome our family attorney, Mr. Vance." A short man in an ill-fitting gray suit walked onto the stage. He was clutching a leather folder to his chest. He looked nervous. He should be. He wasn't the family attorney. He was a man Bianca had found who was willing to overlook ethics for a quick payout. I knew because I had looked him up too. He had 3 reprimands from the Bar Association for mishandling client funds. He fit right in with my family. And now Bianca announced, "Please help me welcome the birthday girl herself, my grandmother Hattie Walker." The double doors to the side of the stage opened. My mother Patricia pushed a wheelchair into the spotlight. Grandma Hattie sat in it, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. She was slumped to one side, a shawl draped over her shoulders. Her hands were shaking in her lap. The acting was impeccable. If I didn't know she had been drinking cognac and analyzing stock trends 12 hours ago, I would have believed it myself. The crowd applauded louder this time, rising to their feet out of respect. Grandma didn't look up. She stared at her knees, blinking rapidly. My mother wheeled her to the center of the stage next to Bianca and Mr. Vance. Kyle joined them, stepping up from the other side. They surrounded her. It looked like a loving family tableau, but from where I stood, it looked like a pack of hyenas circling a wounded gazelle. Bianca knelt down beside the wheelchair. The microphone picked up the sound of her dress rustling. "Grandma," she said loudly, speaking to her like she was a toddler. "Look at all the people who love you. We are all here for you." Grandma made a small, incoherent sound. She patted Bianca's hand weakly. "We want to help you," Grandma Bianca said. "Remember what we talked about. Mr. Vance has the papers. The papers that say you don't have to worry anymore. You just have to make your mark, and we will take care of everything. We will take care of the house, the money, all of it." Mr. Vance stepped forward, opening the leather folder. He placed it on a small table that had been set up next to the wheelchair. The document was thick, bound in blue paper. The power of attorney. Total control. Irrevocable. Kyle produced a pen. It was a gold fountain pen, flashy and pretentious. He uncapped it and held it out. "Here, Hattie," he said, his voice booming. "Just right here on the line." The room was silent. Everyone was watching this touching moment of family unity. My mother leaned in close to Grandma's ear. From the audience, it looked like a comforting embrace. But I was watching her lips. I was watching the tension in her jaw. "Sign it," she whispered. I could read the lips perfectly. "Sign it, or we are putting you in the home tomorrow morning. Do not embarrass us, Hattie." Grandma's hand trembled violently. She reached for the pen, but her fingers couldn't seem to grasp it. It slipped from her hand and clattered onto the table. "Oh dear," Bianca said, letting out a nervous laugh. "She is having a bad day with her tremors." Kyle picked up the pen. He looked sweaty. He looked desperate. "It is okay," he said. "She doesn't have to sign. A fingerprint is legal in Georgia for an incapacitated signer. Mr. Vance, do you have the ink pad?" The lawyer nodded, pulling a small black ink pad from his pocket. This was it. This was the bottom of the barrel. They were going to physically force an 80-year-old woman to press her thumb onto a document transferring millions of dollars of assets into their bankrupt hands. And they were doing it in front of 200 witnesses who thought it was an act of mercy. My mother grabbed Grandma's left hand. She held the wrist firmly. "Just one press, Mom," she said, her voice tight. "Just relax your hand." She began to pull Grandma's thumb toward the ink pad. Grandma pulled back feebly, but my mother was stronger. The thumb hovered inches above the black ink. I pushed off from the pillar. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I walked. I walked with the same rhythm I had used on the stairs. The sound of my heels cutting through the silence of the ballroom. Click, click, click. The crowd parted for me. The green dress was a beacon. I reached the edge of the stage. Kyle saw me first. His eyes widened in panic. He tried to step in front of the table to block my view, but I was already moving up the stairs. "Wait," I said. My voice was not loud, but it was projected perfectly. It was the voice I used in boardrooms when I caught a CEO lying about his revenue. It was a voice that demanded to be heard. My mother froze. Grandma's thumb was hovering an inch from the ink. Bianca stood up, the microphone still in her hand. "Simone," she hissed, covering the mic with her hand. "What are you doing? Get down from here." I walked past her. I walked straight to the table. I looked down at the document. I looked at the lawyer, Mr. Vance, who was suddenly finding his shoes very interesting. I reached out and gently took the ink pad from the lawyer's hand. I snapped the lid shut. "I think we are rushing things," I said, turning to face the crowd. Bianca tried to grab my arm, but I stepped out of reach. "We cannot let Grandma sign away her life without a proper tribute, can we?" I asked the audience, smiling brilliantly. The crowd murmured in agreement. They loved a tribute. I turned to Bianca. "You prepared a video, didn't you, Bianca? A celebration of memories. A slideshow of the family." Bianca blinked confused. Yes, but we were going to show that after the signing, while we cut the cake. No, I said, shaking my head. I think we should watch it now. I looked at Grandma Hattie. She was still slumped in her chair, but beneath the shawl I saw her finger twitch. A signal. I think Grandma needs a moment to rest her hand, I continued. And honestly, looking at this crowd, I think everyone needs a reminder of exactly what this family stands for, what values we hold dear, what kind of people we really are. I grabbed the microphone from Bianca's hand. It was a smooth move, practiced and quick. She didn't even have time to resist. Kyle stepped forward, his face red. Simone, stop this, he whispered. We are on a schedule. The notary is waiting. The notary can wait 5 minutes, Kyle, I said, speaking into the mic so everyone could hear. Unless there is some urgent reason, you need access to the accounts right this second. Is there? Kyle clamped his mouth shut. He couldn't say yes. He couldn't admit to the debt. I smiled at him. I didn't think so. I turned to the AV booth at the back of the room. I raised my hand, hit the lights I ordered, and play the video. Bianca looked relieved. She thought I was just delaying. She thought I was just trying to insert myself into the program. She thought the video was the one she had prepared, the one with the sappy music and the photos of her and Grandma smiling together. She didn't know that I had spent 3 hours in the control room this morning. She didn't know that I had replaced her file. She didn't know that the USB drive plugged into the projector contained a very different kind of family memory. The lights went down. The room plunged into darkness. The huge screen behind the stage flickered to life. My mother let go of Grandma's hand. She stood back, crossing her arms, annoyed but willing to wait. She thought she had won. She thought the signature was inevitable. I stepped back, standing next to Grandma's wheelchair. I rested my hand on her shoulder. Beneath the wool shawl, I felt her body tense, not with fear, but with anticipation. The screen turned white, and then the first image appeared. It wasn't a baby picture. It wasn't a wedding photo. It was a screenshot. High definition. Blow up to 300 inches. The header read, "The Winner's Circle. Group Chat." The first message appeared typed by Bianca. God, I hope the old hag kicks the bucket soon. I need that inheritance before Amex cancels my card. A gasp went through the room. It sounded like all the oxygen being sucked out at once. In the dark, I felt Grandma Hattie reach up and cover my hand with hers. She squeezed it. The show had begun. The darkness that fell over the ballroom was absolute. It was the kind of heavy, anticipated darkness that usually precedes a moment of joy, like the cutting of a cake or a toast to a long life well lived. The guests shifted in their seats, turning their faces toward the massive 300-inch projection screen that dominated the wall behind the stage. They were expecting a montage of sepia-toned photographs set to a sentimental violin track. They were expecting to see Hattie Walker as a young bride, as a mother, as a grandmother, holding newborn babies. They were prepared to wipe away a polite tear and murmur about the beauty of legacy. I stood at the edge of the stage, the microphone cool and heavy in my hand. I felt the hum of the projector powering up, a vibration that traveled through the floorboards and into the soles of my heels. It felt like the engine of a tank rolling into battle. Beside me, my mother Patricia stood with her arms crossed, looking impatient but confident. She had no idea what was coming. She thought I had surrendered. She thought I was playing the video she had approved, the one that painted her as the dutiful daughter and me as the distant failure. Then the beam of light cut through the dark. It hit the screen with blinding intensity. The image that materialized was crystal clear. It was not a photograph. It was a screenshot. The background was the familiar interface of a smartphone messaging app. The header at the top was magnified to the size of a billboard. The Winner's Circle. Beneath the group name, the list of participants was visible. Bianca, Kyle, Mom. The room was silent for a heartbeat. The guests were confused. They squinted at the screen, trying to understand the artistic direction of this tribute. Was this a modern art piece? Was it a technical glitch? Then they started to read. The first message was from Bianca. It was dated 3 weeks ago, time-stamped at 2 in the morning. The text was blown up so large that even the guests in the back row could see the cruelty in high definition. I cannot do this anymore, Mom. The old hag is taking forever to die. She is just sitting there in that house wasting money on heating and electricity. Every day she breathes is another day I have to pretend to care about her stupid stories. Below it was a response from my mother, Patricia. Just be patient, sweetie. The doctors say her heart is weak. Stress helps. Just keep reminding her how confused she is. Make her doubt her own mind. Once she signs the power of attorney, we can put her in the meadows and sell the estate before summer. A sound rippled through the room. It started low, a collective intake of breath that sounded like the air being sucked out of a vacuum. Then came the gasp. It was a physical reaction, a visceral recoil from the words on the screen. I looked at Bianca. In the dim light reflected from the screen, her face was a mask of horror. She wasn't looking at the audience. She was looking at the screen, reading her own words broadcast to the very people she tried so hard to impress. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a scream that never came. My mother was frozen. She stared at the screen as if she could burn the image away with the sheer force of her denial. She looked at the guests who were now turning to look at her with expressions of disgust and disbelief. But I wasn't done. I signaled the technician in the booth. Next slide. The screen flickered and a new image appeared. This one was a conversation between Bianca and Kyle. Kyle's message was highlighted in green. I put 500 on the under, Bianca replied. Under what? Kyle wrote back. Under 6 months. I bet the boys at the club that the old lady kicks the bucket before Christmas. If she holds on until New Year, I lose $50. But if she goes early, we can use the life insurance to pay off the Rover. Daddy needs a new car. This time, the reaction wasn't just gasps. It was audible murmurs of outrage. A woman in the front row, a prominent donor to the church my grandmother built, actually covered her eyes. A senator who had been shaking Kyle's hand 10 minutes ago took a step back, as if Kyle had suddenly become contagious. I watched Kyle. He was standing near the wheelchair, his face illuminated by the glow of his own malice. He looked like a trapped animal. He looked at the screen, then at the audience, then at me. His eyes were wild. He realized in that moment that his social capital had just evaporated. He wasn't the charming real estate mogul anymore. He was a ghoul betting on the death of an 80-year-old woman to pay for a luxury SUV. I raised the microphone to my lips. My voice was calm, steady, and amplified to fill every corner of the room. We often talk about the value of family. I said, my words cutting through the murmurs. We talk about love and support, but sometimes the most honest conversations happen when we think no one is listening. I looked directly at Bianca. You wanted a tribute, Bianca. You wanted everyone to know how much you care. I think this shows exactly how much you care. You care about the timeline. You care about the payout. Bianca shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup for the second time that day. No, she sobbed, her voice cracking without the microphone, but still audible in the stunned silence. That is fake. She photoshopped it. That is not real. Not. I smiled. Is it? I asked. Well, let's look at the next slide. Because numbers are harder to Photoshop than text. I clicked the remote in my hand. Slide 3. This was the kill shot. This was the forensic accounting. The screen split into 2 columns. On the left was a document with the logo of the Internal Revenue Service. It was a notice of intent to levy. The name Kyle Miller was clearly visible along with a social security number that I had partially redacted for legal reasons, but left enough visible to be identifiable. The amount owed was highlighted in red, $124,000 in back taxes and penalties. On the right side of the screen was a foreclosure notice from the bank addressed to Bianca Walker. Notice of default. Amount to cure default. $45,000. Immediate auction scheduled for August 15th. August 15th. That was 3 days away. The room went deadly silent. This was the kind of silence that destroys reputations permanently. In this social circle, debt was the ultimate sin. Being mean was forgivable. Being broke was not. Being a fraud who pretended to be rich while drowning in debt was a social death sentence. The image remained on the screen, burning the truth into the retinas of every guest. The juxtaposition was brutal. The text messages showed the motive. The financial documents showed the desperation. They weren't grieving grandchildren. They were desperate debtors looking for a bailout. Kyle snapped. The realization of what was happening hit him like a physical blow. He saw Mr. Sterling, the billionaire investor, staring at the screen with a look of utter contempt. He saw his carefully constructed facade crumbling into dust. "Turn it off!" he screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched shriek. "Turn it off right now!" He lunged toward the stage. He moved with the frantic energy of a man who has nothing left to lose. He wasn't coming for me. He was coming for the projector. He wanted to destroy the evidence. He wanted to make the darkness come back so he could hide in it. He scrambled up the stairs, his eyes fixed on the AV booth at the back of the room. "You crazy bitch!" he yelled at me as he ran past. "You are lying. It is all lies." He made it 3 steps past the podium before a wall of black muscle materialized in front of him. 2 men stepped out from the shadows of the curtains. They were wearing catering uniforms, the same white shirts and black pants Bianca had tried to force me into. But they were not waiters. They were private security contractors I had hired from a firm in Chicago. Former military, imposing, professional. One of them simply held out a hand, palm open, flat against Kyle's chest. Kyle ran into the hand like he had hit a brick wall. The impact stopped him dead in his tracks. He stumbled back, winded, gasping for air. "Sit down, mister." Miller the guard said, his voice low and devoid of emotion. Kyle looked at the guard, then at me. He looked around for help. But there was no help. The guests were watching him with a mixture of horror and fascination. No one moved to assist him. No one spoke up to defend him. He was alone on an island of his own making. I walked over to where he stood, trembling. I looked down at him from the height of my heels. "It is over, Kyle," I said into the microphone. I turned back to the audience. I gestured to the screen where the red numbers of their debt were still glowing, ominous and bright. "I am sorry to interrupt the party," I said, my voice soft but firm. But my grandmother was about to sign a document that would have given total control of her estate to these 3 people. I pointed to my mother, my sister, and my brother-in-law. "They told you it was because she is sick. They told you it was because she is confused. They told you it was an act of love." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But as you can see, love has nothing to do with it. This is not a guardianship. This is a robbery." I walked over to Grandma Hattie. She was sitting up straight now. She had pulled the shawl off her shoulders. She looked at the audience not with the vacant stare of a dementia patient, but with the sharp, clear gaze of the woman who had built this dynasty. "They need the inheritance," I said, standing beside her. "Not because they want to preserve her legacy, but because they are bankrupt. They have spent money they do not have to impress people they do not like. And now that the bill has come due, they tried to use my grandmother as their checkbook." I looked at Bianca, who was now sobbing openly, her face buried in her hands. "You called me the charity case, Bianca," I said. "You mocked me for living small. You mocked me for working hard. But tonight we see who the real charity case is." I turned back to the crowd. My grandmother is not dying. She is not senile, and she is certainly not signing that paper. I reached down to the table where the power of attorney document still lay next to the uncapped gold pen. I picked it up. I held it up to the light so everyone could see the blue legal binding. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, I ripped it in half. The sound of tearing paper was louder than a gunshot in the silent room. I ripped it again, and again, until it was nothing but confetti in my hands. I threw the pieces into the air. They fluttered down, settling on Kyle's shoulders. and around Bianca's feet like dirty snow. I looked at the lawyer, Mr. Vance. He was already backing away, trying to blend into the curtains. "I think your services are no longer required, Mr. Vance," I said. "But do not worry. I have already forwarded a copy of this presentation to the State Bar Association. I am sure they will be very interested in your involvement here tonight." Mr. Vance turned and ran, exiting through the side door without a word. I looked at my family one last time. They were broken, exposed. The truth had stripped them naked in front of the world they worshipped. I handed the microphone to Grandma Hattie. She took it. Her hand was steady. She cleared her throat. And then she spoke. The ballroom was a cacophony of noise. Bianca was screeching like a banshee, claiming Russian hackers had infiltrated her phone. It was a desperate, pathetic performance. She was grabbing at the guests' sleeves, begging them to believe her, but they were pulling away, their faces twisted in disgust. My mother, Patricia, stood frozen near the overturned ink pad, her face draining of color as she realized her social standing had just evaporated. And Kyle was slumped in a chair guarded by the security team, looking like a man awaiting execution. I stood next to the wheelchair, holding the microphone. I felt the energy shift beside me. It wasn't a subtle shift. It was tectonic. Grandma Hattie, who had spent the last 2 hours slumped over and shaking, suddenly placed her hands on the armrests of the wheelchair. Her grip was firm. Her knuckles were not white with age, they were white with determination. She pushed herself up. A gasp went through the room that rivaled the reaction to the slideshow. The woman who supposedly needed round-the-clock care, the woman they claimed couldn't feed herself, stood up. She didn't wobble. She didn't reach for a cane. She stood at her full height, which was 5 feet 8 inches of pure steel spine. She smoothed down her skirt with a dignity that silenced the room instantly. She reached out and took the microphone from my hand. Her eyes locked onto Bianca, who was still sobbing about the hack. "Shut your mouth, Bianca." The voice was not the quavering whisper of an invalid. It was the boom of thunder. It was the voice that had commanded boardrooms and raised 3 generations. It resonated off the crystal chandeliers and seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. Bianca froze mid-sob. Her mouth hung open. She looked at the grandmother she had mocked, the grandmother she had bet against, and for the first time in her life, she saw the predator behind the prey. "I am old," Hattie said, her voice slicing through the silence. "But I am not blind. And I am certainly not deaf." She stepped forward, walking across the stage without a limp. She looked down at her family lined up like criminals. "Do you think I didn't hear you whispering in the hallways?" she asked. "Do you think I didn't see the brochures for the nursing homes you left on my nightstand? Do you think I didn't notice when my jewelry went missing piece by piece?" My mother, Patricia, stepped forward, her hands shaking. "Mom," she stammered. "Mom, please, you are confused. Simone has put things in your head. This is all a misunderstanding." Hattie laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "A misunderstanding," she repeated. "Was it a misunderstanding when you told the doctors to up my sedative dosage so I would sleep more? Was it a misunderstanding when you told my friends I was too sick for visitors because you didn't want them to see I was fine?" She turned to the screen where the text messages were still glowing. "You called me an old hag," she said, reading Bianca's words. "You said I was wasting money on heat. You bet on the date of my death like it was a horse race." She looked at Kyle. "You wanted to use my life insurance to buy a Range Rover. Well, I have bad news for you, Kyle. I plan on living a very long time, and I plan on driving my own car." Kyle shrank back into his chair, unable to meet her gaze. Hattie reached into the pocket of her dress. She pulled out the leather-bound document I had given her the night before. The living will. The real one. She held it up. "You wanted me to sign a paper tonight," she said. "You wanted me to sign away my power." "Well, I did sign something today, but it wasn't what you wrote." She opened the document. "This is my new living trust," she announced, addressing the guests who were watching with rapt attention. "It was drafted by my attorney Arthur Jenkins, not the crook you hired, and it was signed this morning in the presence of a notary who isn't on your payroll." She put on her reading glasses. The gesture was deliberate and calm. She began to read. I, Harriet Walker, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all previous wills and powers of attorney regarding my daughter, Patricia Walker, my granddaughter, Bianca Walker, and her husband, Kyle Miller. She looked up over her glasses. I leave you nothing, Bianca screamed. It was a guttural sound of pure greed being denied. No, she shrieked. You cannot do that. We are family. Family, Hattie snapped. Family does not steal from family. Family does not wish for death. You are not family. You are parasites. She looked back at the document. Furthermore, she read, I am aware of the debts incurred by these 3 individuals. Let it be known that the Walker estate assumes no responsibility for these debts. The house in Sandy Springs is not mine to save. The credit card bills are not mine to pay. You dug those holes, you can lie in them. My mother fell to her knees. Mom, please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. We will lose everything. They will take the house. We will be on the street. Hattie looked down at her own daughter with a mixture of pity and disgust. You should have thought of that before you booked a private jet on a credit card you couldn't pay, she said. You should have thought of that before you treated my home like an ATM. She turned the page. Now she said, her voice softening slightly but gaining power. As for the disposition of my assets, the house, the land in South Carolina, the stock portfolio, and the Walker Family Foundation. She turned and pointed at me. I hereby transfer full control and trusteeship to my granddaughter, Simone Walker. The room gasped again. I stood there head high, accepting the mantle. She is the only one who has ever contributed to this family without asking for a receipt, Hattie said. She is the only one who paid for my care when you told me the money ran out. She is the only one who built a career with her own hands while you were busy trying to spend mine. Hattie walked over to me. She handed me the leather folder. It was heavy. It felt like justice. She turned back to the sobbing trio on the floor. You called her a charity case, Hattie said, her voice dripping with irony. You mocked her for being poor. You laughed at her clothes. You laughed at her job. She smiled a smile that was terrifyingly sharp. Well, joke's on you, because now she is the charity. Hattie leaned into the microphone. Simone now controls the entire estate. Every dime, every acre. If you want money for food, if you want money for rent, if you want a single penny from the Walker name, you will have to fill out an application. You will have to submit a proposal, and you will have to wait for her approval. She looked at Bianca. So if you want to save your house, I suggest you start being very nice to the sister you tried to turn into a servant, because she is the only bank in town that hasn't blacklisted you yet. Bianca looked at me. Her eyes were wide with horror. She realized the power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted. She would have to beg. She would have to crawl. And she knew I was a forensic accountant. I didn't approve bad investments. Hattie wasn't done. She looked at her watch. Now she said, This is my birthday party. And the air in here smells like desperation. It is ruining my appetite. She signaled to the security guards. The 2 men who were guarding Kyle straightened up. 2 more stepped out from the wings. Please escort these 3 individuals off my property, Hattie ordered, pointing at the door. What? Kyle shouted, standing up. You cannot kick us out. We live here. Not anymore, Hattie said. I changed the locks this morning while you were getting your hair done. Your bags are already on the curb. I had the staff pack them. Don't worry, we used garbage bags. It seemed appropriate. The security guards moved in. They grabbed Kyle by the arms. He tried to struggle, but he was no match for them. They lifted him off his feet. Bianca tried to run toward Grandma, but another guard blocked her path, gently but firmly guiding her toward the exit. My mother, Patricia, stood up. She looked at Grandma, then she looked at me. She tried one last manipulation. Simone, she said, her voice trembling. Are you really going to let them do this? I am your mother. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had watched me be bullied for 30 years and joined in. I looked at the woman who told me to wear a uniform to a party. I checked the time on my imaginary watch. You should probably go, Mom, I said, my voice cool and detached. I hear the Uber rates surge around this time of night, and I don't think you have a ride. Security, take them out, Hattie boomed. The guards began to march them toward the double doors. The guests parted like the Red Sea. No one made eye contact with them. They were pariahs. As they were dragged past the screen, past the glowing evidence of their betrayal, Kyle started screaming obscenities. Bianca was wailing. My mother was silent. Her head hung low. The doors swung open. The humid night air rushed in. The guards shoved them out onto the porch and closed the heavy oak doors with a final resonant thud. The silence that followed was absolute. 200 people stood in the ballroom staring at the closed doors. Then Grandma Hattie turned back to the microphone. She adjusted her shawl. She looked at the crowd. I apologize for the interruption, she said, her voice returning to the gracious tone of a hostess. It seems we had some trash to take out. She looked at the band leader. Hit it, boys, she said. I believe I was promised a cake. The band struck up a lively jazz number. The tension broke. The guests laughed a little nervously at first, but then with genuine relief. The waiters began to circulate with fresh champagne. Grandma walked over to me. She took the microphone from my hand and placed it on the stand. Then she pulled me into a hug. It was the kind of hug that crushed ribs and mended hearts. We did it, she whispered in my ear. I hugged her back, tears pricking my eyes, not tears of sadness, but tears of release. We did it, Grandma, I said. Mr. Sterling walked up to us holding 2 glasses of champagne. He handed one to Grandma and one to me. That, he said, looking at the closed doors, was the most impressive board meeting I have ever attended. Grandma took the glass. She raised it to him. Mr. Sterling, she said, I hope you will stay for cake. Simone tells me you have an opening for a CFO. We should discuss her signing bonus. I laughed. The sound was free and light. I looked at the screen, which was now showing a photo of me and Grandma from 20 years ago, smiling on the porch. The charity case was closed. The trust fund baby was dead. And Simone Walker, the CEO of her own destiny, had just taken charge. I took a sip of champagne. It tasted like victory. But the best part wasn't the money. It wasn't the house. It was the silence. The beautiful, peaceful silence of a life without them. And as the band played on, I knew that the real party had just begun. The last guest had departed, leaving only the faint scent of expensive perfume and the lingering echo of jazz music in the foyer. The house, which had always felt like a museum of pretension, suddenly felt different. It felt lighter, as if the very walls had exhaled a breath they had been holding for decades. The security team had finished their sweep, confirming that my mother, sister, and brother-in-law were off the premises. Mr. Sterling had shaken my hand one last time, promising to have the contract for the CFO position on my desk by Monday morning before stepping into his waiting limousine. I stood in the center of the ballroom, looking at the empty champagne flutes and the crumbled remains of the power of attorney document on the floor. It was over. The war was won. But there was one final piece of business to attend to, one final cord to cut. I walked out the front door, the cool night air hitting my skin. My Porsche was waiting in the driveway, its black paint gleaming under the porch lights. I saw the valet driver approaching, but I waved him off. I wanted to drive myself. I wanted to feel the steering wheel in my hands, the control that I had fought so hard to regain. As I walked toward the car, a shadow detached itself from the side of the house. I knew who it was before she stepped into the light. Her posture was slumped, her shoulders hunched, the arrogant matriarch replaced by a trembling old woman terrified of the future she had created. It was my mother, Patricia. She had obviously waited in the bushes, hiding from the security guards, waiting for a moment alone with me. Her makeup was smeared, and her dress, which had looked so elegant hours ago, now hung on her frame like a shroud. She looked at me with eyes that were red and swollen, but behind the tears I could still see the calculation. She was already rewriting the narrative in her head, looking for the angle, looking for the lever she could pull to open my wallet. Simone, she choked out, stepping into my path. I stopped. I did not step back. I did not cross my arms. I simply stood there, holding my clutch purse, and looked at her. Mom, I said, my voice flat. You are trespassing. Grandma Hattie was very clear. I know, she sobbed, wringing her hands together, but I had to talk to you. I had to explain. You have to understand, Simone. It wasn't me. It was never me. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, the same tone she used to use when gossiping about neighbors. It was Kyle. He is a monster, Simone. He manipulated us. He manipulated Bianca. He told us he had money. He told us the investments were sound. We were victims too. He threatened us. He said if we didn't help him get the inheritance, he would ruin the family name. I watched her performance with a detached fascination. It was masterful. Within an hour of being exposed, she had already cast herself as the victim and Kyle as the sole villain. She was ready to throw him under the bus, back up over him, and drive off if it meant saving her own skin. And Bianca, I asked quietly. Was she a victim when she called Grandma an old hag in the group chat? My mother flinched but recovered quickly. She was stressed, Simone. Kyle put so much pressure on her. You know how easily influenced your sister is. She is not strong like you. She is weak. She needs guidance. She needs her mother. And she needs her sister. She reached out, trying to take my hand. I let her touch me for a second, feeling the cold, clammy sweat on her palm before I pulled my hand away. We can fix this, Simone, she pleaded. Now that you are in charge, you can make things right. You can pay off the debts. We can kick Kyle out. It can be just us, the Walker women, like it used to be. I can help you manage the estate. I know the social circle. I know the protocols. You need me. I looked at her, at the desperation etching lines into her face. She didn't want me. She wanted the access I now had. She wanted the proximity to the money. She was like a vine looking for a new trellis to strangle. I reached into my bag. My mother's eyes lit up. She stopped crying instantly. She thought I was reaching for a checkbook. She thought I was reaching for cash. She thought the old Simone, the one who craved her approval, the one who bought her love with designer bags, was back. I pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope. It was heavy. Here, I said, handing it to her. She snatched it from my hand, her fingers trembling with greed. She ripped it open, expecting to see a check with a lot of zeros. She pulled out the stack of papers, her brow furrowed. She flipped through them. They weren't checks. They were invoices. Page after page of billing statements from Dr. Evans, my therapist in Chicago. 8 years of weekly sessions. 8 years of undoing the damage she had inflicted. What is this? She asked, looking up at me in confusion. I took a step closer, invading her personal space for the first time. That is the cost of being your daughter, I said. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing. I calculated it. I continued, my voice calm and analytical. At $200 a session for 8 years, plus the cost of anxiety medication and the lost wages from the days I couldn't get out of bed because I felt worthless, it comes to about $80,000. I pointed to the papers in her hand. You asked for money, Mom. You asked to be family. Well, families share burdens, right? So you can keep that. That is my burden. Simone. She whispered, the paper shaking in her hand. This is cruel. No, I said. Cruel is betting on your daughter's divorce. Cruel is telling your child she is a charity case while you steal from her grandmother. This isn't cruel. This is accounting. I walked around her toward the driver's side of the Porsche. I am not a bank, Mom. And I am certainly not the emotional trash can you use to dump your insecurities into anymore. The bank is closed. The trash can is full. I opened the car door. Simone. Wait, she cried, reaching for the handle. Where will I go? I have nowhere to go. I paused, looking at her over the roof of the car. You are a smart woman, Patricia. You always told me I had to figure things out on my own. You told me struggle builds character. I opened the door and slid into the leather seat. Well, consider this a character-building opportunity. One last thing I said, leaning out the window. She looked at me, hope flaring one last time in her eyes. I changed my number this morning. Don't look for me. And don't look for Grandma. If you come near the estate again, the security team has instructions to call the police. And unlike the security team tonight, the police won't be as gentle. I pulled the door shut. The sound was a solid, heavy thud that sealed off the outside world. I saw my mother standing in the driveway, clutching the invoices to her chest, looking small and defeated in the red glow of my taillights. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I felt weightless. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a deep, guttural growl of power. I looked over at the passenger seat. Grandma Hattie was sitting there. She had ditched the shawl. She was wearing her party dress, and on her head sat a glittering tiara that she must have pulled from her purse. She looked like a runaway queen. She looked at me and grinned. "Did you give her the bill?" she asked. I nodded, putting the car into gear. "Every cent." Good Grandma said, adjusting her tiara. She never did understand the value of $1 or a daughter. We rolled down the long driveway, the gravel crunching beneath the tires. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I kept my eyes forward on the road ahead, on the life that was waiting for us. We passed the gate where the security guard gave us a sharp salute. We turned onto the main road, leaving the estate behind, leaving the toxicity and the lies in the dust. "Where to, Grandma?" I asked, pressing down on the accelerator, feeling the car surge forward. Grandma looked at the digital clock on the dashboard. It read 11:45 p.m. "Well," she said, tapping her chin thoughtfully, "we have celebrated. We have conquered. We have evicted the parasites. I think we deserve a treat." She looked at me, her eyes twinkling. "Is the ice cream machine working at McDonald's, do you think?" I laughed. "For you, Grandma, I will make it work." 20 minutes later, the sleek black Porsche Panamera pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour McDonald's on the outskirts of Buckhead. It looked ridiculous parked next to the beat-up sedans and delivery trucks. I was wearing a $5,000 emerald gown. Grandma was wearing a tiara and diamonds. We walked inside, holding our heads high. The teenager behind the counter looked up, his eyes widening as he took in our appearance. He looked like he thought he was hallucinating. "Can I help you?" he stammered. Grandma stepped up to the counter. "Yes, young man," she said with the same authority she had used to banish Kyle. "2 McFlurries with extra Oreo and large fries, fresh ones." We sat in a booth near the window, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. It was a far cry from the crystal chandeliers and the jazz quartet, but as I watched Grandma dip a French fry into her ice cream, her face relaxed and happy, I knew this was the best meal I had ever had. We didn't talk about Bianca. We didn't talk about the money. We talked about the future. Grandma told me about a trip she wanted to take to Italy. She asked me about the CFO job. She told me stories about my grandfather that I had never heard before, stories about how they built their life not with greed, but with grit. I looked at her, at the wrinkles around her eyes that were crinkling with laughter. I realized that the inheritance wasn't the money. The inheritance was this spirit, this resilience, this ability to find joy in a plastic booth in the middle of the night. I took a spoonful of ice cream, the cold sweetness hitting my tongue. My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. I knew it was probably a notification from the security company, or maybe an email from Mr. Sterling. It didn't matter. It could wait. I looked out the window at the dark parking lot. Somewhere out there, my family was scrambling, dealing with the consequences of their actions. They were calling lawyers who wouldn't answer. They were looking for hotels that required credit cards they didn't have. They were feeling the cold wind of reality for the first time. They had spent 8 years calling me a charity case. They had spent 8 years trying to make me feel small, so they could feel big. They thought wealth was something you wore, something you drove, something you performed. They didn't understand that true wealth is freedom, True wealth is sleeping at night knowing you haven't hurt anyone. True wealth is sitting in a McDonald's with the person you love most in the world, knowing that no one can ever take this moment away from you. Grandma caught me staring. "What are you thinking, Simone?" she asked, wiping a crumb from her lip. I smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "I am thinking that I love this family," I said. "The real one. Us." Grandma squeezed back. "Us against the world, kid," she said, raising her plastic spoon in a toast. "Us against the world," I repeated, tapping my spoon against hers. As we sat there, two queens in a fast food kingdom, I realized that the revenge was complete. But the sweetness didn't come from their downfall. It came from my rise. Hattie and I finished our ice cream, got back in the Porsche, and drove into the night. We didn't know exactly where we were going next, but we knew who was driving. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead was wide open. They lost everything because they grasped for what wasn't theirs. I gained everything because I was willing to let go of what hurt me. The sweetest revenge isn't seeing them suffer. It is seeing myself happy without them. It is realizing that I never needed their table. I just needed to build my own. And looking at Grandma Hattie laughing in the passenger seat with the wind in her hair, I knew one thing for sure. This table was full. And we were just getting started. This story taught me that true wealth isn't measured by the balance in your bank account, but by the boundaries you set to protect your peace. My family spent years trying to define my worth based on their own insecurities, calling me a charity case to mask their moral bankruptcy. But I learned that you cannot heal in the same environment that broke you. The most powerful move you can make is not to fight for a seat at a toxic table, but to build your own. Walking away wasn't an act of cruelty, it was an act of survival. If you have ever had to choose your dignity over your family, hit that like button and subscribe. Share your story in the comments below. I want to know how you found your freedom.